education is irrelevant to service, and the all-volunteer force visibly reflects the nation it protects. Our military is more diverse than it has ever been, but more importantly, it is more lethal than it has ever been. This is not a coincidence. Mr. Hegseth, I hope you will explain why you believe such diversity is making the military weak and how you propose to undo that without undermining military leadership and harming readiness, recruitment, and retention. Mr. Hegseth, another reason I'm deeply concerned about your nomination is your disregard for the law of armed conflict and your support for service members who have been convicted of war crimes. You have championed the pardoning of military members who were turned in by their fellow soldiers and SEALs. And let me emphasize that. They weren't discovered by reporters. They were turned in by fellow soldiers and fellow SEALs. And also pardoning of military contractors convicted of killing 14 Iraqi citizens without cause. You have also advocated for the restitution of interrogation methods like waterboarding that have been defined as torture, and you have belittled the advice and counsel of the Judge Advocates General while on deployment. In your book, The War on Warriors, you write, quote, "Should we follow the Geneva Convention? If our warriors are forced to follow rules arbitrarily and asked to sacrifice more lives so that international tribunals feel better about themselves,
sorry, I'm just trying to...
aren't we just better off in winning our wars according to our own
Going
rules?"
live is...
Mr. Hegseth, I would ask that you explain how you, if confirmed, would maintain good order and discipline within our forces and the support of our allies and partners by rejecting international law and the law of war. I'm also concerned about your abilities as a competent manager of organizations far less complex than the Department of Defense. From 2008 to 2010, you led the organization Veterans for Freedom.
Do you think he's drunk?
Which had an annual budget of less than $10 million.
Maybe a shot.
In each
he had a
year
shot
you were in
before.
charge, expenses far exceeded revenues until the organization teetered on bankruptcy and had to be merged with another group. In fact, according to public reporting, an independent forensic accountant reviewed the organization's finances and discovered evidence of gross financial mismanagement. I would note that this report has not been made available to any government agencies, which is, I think, alarming. But a Republican advisor to you during your tenure at the organization who read the report stated, and I quote, "I watched him run an organization very poorly, lose the confidence of donors.
I agree, Barbara.
The organization ultimately folded and was forced to merge with another organization who individuals felt could run and manage funds on behalf of donors more responsibly than he could. I don't know how he's going to run an organization with an $857 billion budget and 3 million individuals." And that is the only comment we've had and the only access we've had to the forensic report. A similar thing happened with the Concerned Veterans for America, a second veterans group that you led from 2011 until 2016. During those 5 years, tax records show that the organization spent more than it raised. Just as troubling are reports that a significant amount of debt was incurred from social events and parties filled with excessive drinking and questionable personal behavior. Mr. Hegseth, I hope you will explain what actions you will take, if confirmed, to be a better steward of Defense Department's large budget. Finally, while I appreciate our meeting last week, it is unacceptable that you did not meet with any other Democratic members of this committee before this hearing.
Wow.
As
Didn't meet
has
anyone
been
else.
our bipartisan tradition.
Hey, Eric, look at me.
During
I'm
my time in the
live.
Senate, I have voted for and worked closely with Secretaries of Defense appointed by Republican presidents. While we may disagree politically, there was always an understanding that rank partisanship should have no place when it comes to providing for the men and women who serve in uniform. And Mr. Hegseth, I am troubled by the many comments you have made both as a commentator and in your published writings. For example, in your book, American Crusade, you wrote, quote,
"This guy's kind of tearing him up in like the nicest way possible.
Represent the soul of the modern Democratic Party, literally hate the foundational ideas of America." You also wrote, "The other side, the left, is not our friend. We are not esteemed colleagues, nor mere political opponents. We are foes. Either we win or they win. We agree on nothing else." Mr. Hegseth, if confirmed as Secretary of Defense, you would lead an organization that, like the country it represents, is composed of Democrats and Republicans. Yet your language suggests that you regard
Hegseth
many
isn't
of these
qualified
men
to
and women
lead a
as
school.
foes. And I would ask
Would you
you to
want him to
explain
be
why servicemen and
principal
civilians who do not share
at
your
your
political
kid's school?
opinions
No.
can trust
If you
that they
found
will
out what
not
you
be
found about this guy, but
targeted
you want to
during your
lead
tenure.
the
Indeed,
largest
the challenge of
bureaucracy in the
Secretary of
world,
Defense is to remove partisan
Okay.
politics from the military. You propose to inject it. This would be an insult to the men and women who have sworn to uphold their own apolitical duty to the Constitution. Mr. Hegseth, you are the 9th nominee for Secretary of Defense that I've had the honor to consider as a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee. I have voted in favor of all your predecessors, including those in the first Trump administration. Unfortunately, you lack the character and composure and competence to hold the position of Secretary of Defense. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Reed. And now it's my privilege and honor and pleasure to recognize two witnesses who have come forward to introduce our nominee. First, I recognize my former colleague and former Senator Norm Coleman of Minnesota for the purpose
it is crazy
of an
that he's putting
introduction.
himself
Norm,
through this.
We are glad to see you and glad to have you back, and you are recognized for an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Reed, members of the committee, my former colleagues. I'm honored to introduce a son of Minnesota to you, Pete Hegseth. As a senator from Minnesota, I spent many hours with this young man as he walked the halls of Congress advocating on behalf of America's veterans. And he is young in the best sense of the word. He is strong, focused, intelligent,
I'm just going to
decisive.
level set with all of you. This is why this is scary. I'm going to lower this guy. This is why this is scary. Because we don't need to hear this guy lie about Pete Hegseth right now. Because Donald Trump did not care about the Treasury Secretary. He didn't care about, I'm trying to think of all the there are so many appointments that are just, they don't matter, right? He didn't care about those. He put people who were qualified in those positions, in fact. But when it came to national security, Department of Defense, and when it came to the FBI, Donald Trump put people up who are grossly unqualified for these positions. And you got to ask yourself, why did he do that? Because when you put an unqualified person in a position they have no business being in, they have nothing but loyalty and subservient to you. And those three positions I just mentioned, the FBI, National Intelligence, Department of Defense, those are the departments that you'd want to be in control of if you wanted to do an autocratic takeover of the U.S. government. So that's what this is all about. Pete Hegseth being unqualified is a feature, not a bug.
Strongly, if necessary, but then come together to support the nominee, this nominee, Pete Hegseth, of the one president we have at a time, laying aside partisan politics for the essential mission of national security upon which everything else depends. Mr. Chairman, I yield.
Thank you, Norm. I do appreciate that and appreciate your presence today. I now have the honor and pleasure of introducing Congressman Waltz. I understand, Congressman, you are still a member of the House for another day or two.
Another day or two.
Okay, and I now recognize Congressman Waltz for whatever opening statement and introduction he might make.
Well, thank you, Chairman Wicker, and Chairman has a very nice ring to it, so congratulations, Ranking Member Reed, distinguished members of this committee. It is a privilege to appear before you today and urge the members of this committee to confirm Pete Hegseth as our next Secretary of Defense. And I'm not here today just to advocate on behalf of a future colleague, but to speak on behalf of someone I consider a dear friend for over
These guys
a
all look
decade
like they
now,
came out of a factory.
decade now. Like Pete,
Like,
I served in the U.S. Army. Like Pete, I'm a veteran. We deployed to Afghanistan and all over the world at the height of the war on terror, which is the war of our generation. And like thousands of other warfighters, we've
Maureen,
witnessed the hardships
we
of
must
war.
watch.
We've experienced the
We
loss
must
of friends in combat.
They
We've
want us
endured
to be
too much time away from family.
They want us
and
to be
friends, and no one. I can
broken
promise you
down. They
this,
want us to be
no one
nihilists. They
hates
want us to
war
feel like nothing
more
matters. We
than
got to
those
watch it
who have had
matters.
to go fight it.
And
No one does.
being informed is one way that
Pete's
you can be
story,
a
though, isn't
responsible
that much
citizen.
different from the
And
millions
fascists
of
and
other
autocrats
veterans.
rely
And they
on
know,
us
and
to
they
not care.
appreciate him for the
They want us to not
experiences
care.
that he's gone through. And after our country was brutally attacked on 9/11, Pete Hegseth answered the call of duty like so many others. He put the interests of this country ahead of his own. And I can tell you firsthand, as can the heroes sitting in this audience behind me, Pete's character of country, his selflessness, his duty, these are the key tenets that have shaped him into the leader that he is today. These
Yes.
are the traits that President Trump recognized when making the decision to nominate Pete for this critical role. He will bring the perspective of being the first Secretary of Defense to have served as a junior officer on the front lines, not in the headquarters.
His
on
tattoos
the
are
front
nuts.
lines in the war on terror, and recognizes the human costs, the financial costs, and the policy drift that was discussed often in this very room.
Aren't they right wing? Like, aren't they like,
that led us to decades
they're like white supremacist
and
tattoos?
decades of war. So not only does he understand the threats he faces, but as the chairman mentioned, he is brilliant in my mind at communicating those to the American people in a way that is often not communicated in Washington, D.C., to reach out to the American people so that they understand why the military needs to do what it needs to
gonna
do.
find those for us.
And look, I have no doubt that he is going to get the Pentagon back to its primary mission, lethal readiness. That warrior ethos is what our enemies will respect. That warrior ethos is what our enemies will fear. And it's that warrior ethos that will keep the peace. And so, ladies and gentlemen, in my humble opinion, our military deserves better than it's getting. Our country faces a devastating recruitment crisis. Men and women are not volunteering to serve at the levels required. Our readiness is down. Our costs are up. And it seems like
Look at
nearly
these.
every major weapon system in this very room is costing, often discussed in this very room, is costing too much,
These are like
delivering too little, and taking way
Christian
too long.
nationalist tattoos.
The bottom line is
This is the guy that I want
the
leading
status
us.
quo is unacceptable. It's not working. And the members of this committee, you all know it. You know it's not working.
Real nice.
And the members of the
It's
House
nice.
Armed Services know it's not working. And we have hearing after hearing, year after year. And here we are, decades later, describing the same problems. The Pentagon has continuously failed audits. The businesses that want to do business with the Pentagon have to pass an audit. But the entity itself.
This is boring. I mean, this can be
fails an
boring
audit.
for a second
Innovation is
because
stalled. Morale
these
is
are just
down.
like,
Standards have been
you
weakened.
know,
And meritocracy
it's the,
is less valued.
it's the
And as a
foreplay. You
result,
know what I
our
mean? It's the
adversaries have been
foreplay.
emboldened
They're
all
just
over the
like
world. Ladies
doing
and gentlemen, it's time to
intros. They're
change.
just like gassing each other
It
up.
is time
They're setting
for
stakes. This guy's just lying through his
You
teeth.
all have literally seen
But then the real
thousands
questions
of
come. And what I'm
veterans
looking
as the
for,
chair-
what I'm looking for are the Republicans and what they ask. I want to know, like, I want to see if they ask pointed questions.
ethos, and this is a man that will lead. I can't imagine having a more capable partner in my position as National Security Advisor. Pete is a man of family, of faith, and he's committed to making our country strong again. And most importantly, and brother, I know this in my core, he will always have as a first principle the service members that are out there on the front lines for all of us at the heart of every decision he makes. So, senators, I urge you to support this confirmation.
Mostly
It
they're
is
softball.
critical that President Trump has his national security team in place for the challenges ahead, and I thank you.
Thank you, Mike, for your testimony, and I'm guessing that each and every member of this committee will want to have you on speed dial for the next few years. So thank you both. Our two guests may stay, or I know they have other engagements and responsibilities also, but thank you both for your testimony. At this point, Mr. Hegseth,
Is it okay to say that I think Congress
I'm
is just
required
too
to
old?
ask
Is that okay to
you
say
as a
here?
nominee a series of
Like,
questions
can we,
that
like-
the committee asks all civilian nominees who appear before it. If you would, please simply respond in the affirmative
Don't get me
or
wrong, I
negative
think
to
experience
each
matters,
question. Have you
but-
adhered to applicable laws and regulations governing conflicts of interest?
Yes, sir.
Like, come on.
Have you assumed any duties or taken any actions that would appear to presume the outcome of the confirmation process?
No, sir.
Age 70, I
Exercising
like
our
that.
legislative and oversight responsibilities makes it important that this committee,
Audrey,
its
don't leave us.
subcommittees,
No, it's okay, I
and
get
other
it.
appropriate committees of Congress receive testimony, briefings, reports, records, and other information from the executive branch on a timely basis. Do you agree, if confirmed, to appear and testify before this committee when requested?
Yes, sir.
Do you agree to provide records, documents, and electronic communications in a
Barbara.
timely manner when requested by this committee, its subcommittees, or other appropriate committees of Congress, and to consult with the requester
All
regarding
right, so
the
I don't go
basis
live that
for
much,
any
but
good faith
is
delay
when
or
I
denial
talk, can
in
you hear
providing
me? Like,
such
is,
records?
or can you not hear anything when I talk
Will you
over
ensure that
over
your
them?
staff complies with deadlines established by this committee for the production of reports, records, and other information, including timely responding to
Sound is good?
hearing
Okay.
questions for the record?
Yes, sir.
Will you cooperate in providing
Yay,
witnesses
okay, I
and
did it well.
briefers in
Hell yes.
response to
Woo!
congressional requests?
Yes, sir.
Will those witnesses and briefers
Okay,
be
good.
protected
Yay,
from
yay,
reprisal
yay, yay.
for their testimony or briefings?
Great. I got a new mic. I'm very excited.
All right,
No, I don't think you can tell the difference, but it's exciting for me. I spent like
So
A lot
at-
of money
at
in this mic.
point, Mr. Hegseth, you are recognized for your opening
all
statement.
right, let's go. Here we go.
Well, thank you, Chairman Wicker, Ranking Member Reed, and all the members of this committee for this opportunity today. I'm grateful for and have learned a great deal from this advise and consent process. Our founders knew what they were doing. Should I be confirmed, I look forward
Thank
to
you,
working
Kelly.
with this committee, senators from both parties, to secure our nation. I want to thank the former senator from Minnesota, Norm Coleman, for his mentorship and
Thank you,
friendship
Barbara.
in this process. And the incoming National Security Advisor, Congressman, and more importantly for our purposes, Colonel Mike Waltz, for his powerful words. I'm grateful to them both. Thank you to my incredible wife, Jennifer, who has changed my life and been with me throughout this entire process. I love you, sweetheart, and I thank God for you. And as Jenny and I pray together every morning, all glory, regardless of the outcome, belongs to our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.
Oh my gosh.
His grace and mercy abounds each day. May his will be done. Thank you to my father,
Okay.
Brian, and mother, Penny,
Yeah,
as well as
Jesus
our entire
had nothing
family,
to do with this, bro.
including our 7 wonderful kids, Gunnar, Jackson, Peter Boone,
Jesus.
Kensington, Luke, Rex. Sorry, it's a lot of them. And Gwendolyn. Their future safety
Fake
and security
Christians, I
is in all of
know.
our hands. And to all the troops and veterans watching and here in the room, Navy SEALs, Green Berets, soldiers, pilots, sailors, Marines, Gold Stars, and more, too many friends to name. Officers, enlisted, black,
That's a
and
good
white,
point. Imagine
young
if I was at
and
an
old,
interview
men
at
and
Denny's.
women,
I just
all
want to thank
Americans,
Jesus Christ
all
for getting me this
warriors.
interview.
This hearing
Without Jesus
is
Christ, they'd
for
be
you.
like,
Thank you for figuratively and literally having my back.
Mark, may he hit the smite button.
You are a misogynist. Not only that, you are a Christian
Oh.
Zionist.
Good. Protester. All right.
I want to thank the authorities for their swift reaction.
Let's
to
go,
that
baby.
outburst, and state that similar interruptions will be treated in like manner. Mr. Hegseth, you may continue.
Protest.
As I'll
I
say
love
again,
that.
Thank you for figuratively
That
and
was
literally
Jesus.
having my back.
That was Jesus.
I pledge to do the same for all of you.
I believe that.
It's an honor to come before this committee today as
was
President Donald
Jesus hitting
Trump's
the smite
nominee
button.
for the office of Secretary of Defense. 2 months ago, 77 million Americans gave President Trump a powerful mandate for change, to put America first, at home and abroad.
Renee, thank you
I
for
wanna
becoming a
thank
member.
President
Boop,
Trump
boop, boop,
for his faith in me and his
Thank you for
selfless
becoming a member of the
leadership
channel.
for our republic. The troops have no better commander-in-chief than Donald Trump. As I've said to many of you in private meetings, when President Trump chose me for this position, the primary charge he gave me was to bring the warrior culture back to the Department of Defense. He, like me, wants a Pentagon laser-focused on lethality, meritocracy, warfighting, accountability, and readiness.
Yes! Yes! Say that, say that, say that. Hell yes. Say that. Let's get some claps in the chat,
You may
baby.
continue, sir.
Returning the Pentagon back to warfighting, that's it. That's my job.
Mr. Hegseth, suspend your remarks. Let me just say this. The Capitol Police are going to remove immediately individuals that are disrupting the hearing. I see
Yeah.
a pattern attempted to
Felicia became a member.
on the
Boop, boop,
committee,
boop,
and we're simply
Thank you,
not going to
Felicia.
tolerate that.
I love
proceed.
the protests.
To bring back warfighting, if confirmed, I'm going to work with President Trump
All right, now I
and
love
this
watching
committee
this.
to, one, restore the warrior ethos to the Pentagon and throughout our fighting force. In doing so, we will reestablish trust in our military, addressing the recruiting crisis, the retention crisis, and readiness crisis in our ranks.
Members of the security force will remove...
No, not carrying him out. This is going terribly for him.
Mr. Hegseth, you may.
The strength of our military is our unity and our shared purpose, not our differences.
Oh, I'm getting hot.
Number two, we're going to rebuild our military, always matching threats to capabilities. This includes reviving our defense industrial base, reforming the acquisitions process. As you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, no more valley of death for new defense companies, modernizing our nuclear triad, ensuring the Pentagon can pass an audit, and rapidly fielding emerging technologies. And number three, we're going to reestablish deterrence. First and foremost, we will defend our homeland, our borders, and our skies.
He almost goofed and said
Second,
we're
we
gonna
will work with
rebuild
our
America.
partners
Funny.
and allies to deter aggression in
I
the
want more.
Indo-Pacific from the Communist Chinese. And finally, we will responsibly end wars to ensure that we prioritize our resources to reorient to larger threats. We can no longer count on reputational deterrence. We need real deterrence. The Department of Defense under Donald Trump will achieve peace through strength. And in pursuing these America First national security goals, will remain patriotically apolitical and stridently constitutional.
Bro, he is
Unlike
going
the
to
current
put the military
administration,
on U.S.
politics
citizens
should
if
play
he
no
gets
part
elected.
in military
100%.
matters. We are not
Military
Republicans.
on us.
We are not Democrats. We are American warriors.
Military
Our
invading blue
standards will be
states.
high, and they will be equal, not equitable. That's a very different word. We need to make sure every warrior is fully qualified on their assigned weapons system, every pilot's fully qualified and current on the aircraft they are flying, and every general or flag officer is selected for leadership or promotion purely based on performance,
He did get a little
readiness,
triggered.
and merit. Leaders at all levels will be held accountable. And warfighting and lethality and the readiness
No,
of
they-
the
so they're
troops
just doing
and
the
their
intros now.
families will be our only focus. This has been my focus ever since I first put on the uniform as a young Army ROTC cadet at Princeton University in 2001.
What background change?
I joined the military because I love my country and felt an obligation to defend it. I served with incredible Americans in Guantanamo Bay, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and on the streets of Washington, D.C., many of which are with me here today. This includes enlisted soldiers I helped become American citizens.
He is not qualified.
And Muslim allies I helped immigrate from Iraq and Afghanistan. Because when I took off the uniform, my mission never stopped. Now, it is true and has been acknowledged that I don't have a similar biography
I want
to
more
defense
protesters.
secretaries of the last 30 years.
3 was good, though. 3 was
But as
good.
President Trump also told me, we've repeatedly placed people atop the Pentagon with supposedly the right credentials, whether they are retired generals, academics, or defense contractor executives. And where has it gotten us? He believes, and I humbly agree, that it's time to give someone with dust on his boots the helm. A change agent, someone with no vested interest in certain companies or specific programs or approved narratives. My only special interest is the warfighter. Deterring wars, and if called upon, winning wars by ensuring our warriors never enter a fair fight. We let them win, and we bring them home. Like many of my generation, I've been there. I've led troops in combat. I've been on patrol for days. I've pulled a trigger down range, heard bullets whiz by, flex-cuffed insurgents, called in close air support, led medevacs, dodged IEDs, pulled out dead bodies, and knelt before a battlefield cross. This is not academic for me. This is my life. I led then, and I will lead now.
You're a Fox
Ask
News
anyone
anchor
who's ever worked for me.
on the morning show.
I know
on the weekends.
what I don't know. My success as a leader, and I very
And you're
much
a
look
sexual
forward to
abuser.
discussing my organization's successes at Vets for Freedom and Concerned Veterans for America. I'm incredibly proud of the work that we've done. But my success as a leader has always been setting a clear vision, hiring people smarter and more capable than me.
He is kind of feeling
empowering
himself.
them to succeed, holding everyone accountable, and driving toward clear metrics. Build the plan.
I just wish
work the plan,
Kamala
and then work harder than everyone
was
else
on
around
this
you.
panel to
I've
ask him.
sworn an oath to the Constitution
questions.
before, and if confirmed, I will proudly do it again. This time, for the most important deployment of my life.
Oh my God.
I pledge to be a faithful partner to this committee, taking input and respecting oversight. We share the same goals: a ready, lethal military, the health and well-being of our troops, and a strong and secure America. Thank you for the time, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hegseth.
Okay.
Before we begin with member questions, I would like to
wanna
remind
see if
my
this is
colleagues
working.
that consistent
working.
with the bipartisan staff agreement from December,
It
and
is
in
working.
concert with exactly how this committee dealt with
Do you
the
want
last
the,
Secretary of Defense nominee, each member will be recognized
Do you want the chat on the
for
screen?
one round of 7 minutes to question the nominee.
So you're there?
Out of respect for the time of
I
all
can make it
members
smaller.
of this committee, the time limits will be tightly enforced.
Do you want to be on the screen?
We've now been here 45 minutes, and I think we've done very well with the time.
Yeah? Okay.
But
I'm gonna make
at
it
this
smaller.
point, I will begin my questioning of.
So
the
now you're a
nominee.
part of the show.
Mr. Hegseth,
No?
you and your family have endured
No?
criticism of
Okay,
the
fine.
nomination since it was announced in November. Let's
Okay.
get into this allegation about sexual assault, inappropriate workplace behavior, alcohol abuse, and financial mismanagement during your time as a nonprofit executive. I should note that the majority of these have
Fine
come
with
from
that. All right.
anonymous sources
Never mind.
in
Never mind.
liberal media publications. But I want to give you an opportunity to respond to these allegations, sir.
Oh, here we go.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for that opportunity. You are correct. We undertook this responsibility with an obligation to the troops to do right by them for our warfighters. And what became very evident to us from the beginning, there was a coordinated smear campaign orchestrated in the media against us. That was clear from moment one.
Okay.
And what we knew is that it wasn't about me.
It's the media.
Most of it was about President Donald Trump, who's had to endure the very same thing for much longer amounts of time. And he endured it incredibly strong ways. So we, in some ways, knew it was coming. We didn't understand the depth of the dishonesty that would come with it. So from story after story in the media, left-wing media, we saw anonymous source after anonymous source based on second or third-hand accounts. And time again, stories would come out, and people would reach out to me and say, you know, I've spoken to this reporter about who you really are, and I was willing to go on the record. But they didn't print my quote.
Oh,
They
no.
didn't print any of my quotes.
They didn't print your lie.
I've worked with you for 10 years, or I was your accountant, or I was your chief operating officer, or I was your board member, or I was with you on 100 different tour stops for Concerned Veterans for America. No one called me. No one asked about your conduct on the record
It's not
or
how
off the
reporting
record.
works.
Instead, a small handful of anonymous sources were allowed to drive a smear campaign, an agenda about me, because our left-wing media in America today, sadly, doesn't care about the truth. All they were out to do, Mr. Chairman, was to destroy me. And why do they want to destroy me? Because I'm a change agent and a threat to them, because Donald Trump was willing to choose me, to empower me, to bring the Defense Department back to what it really should be, which is
Scary.
warfighting. So I'm
Scary.
willing to endure these attacks. But what I will do is stand up for the truth and for my reputation. False attacks, anonymous attacks, repeated ad nauseum, printed as nauseum, as facts. We have provided to the committee, Mr. Chairman, and I know you're going to share, on-the-record statement after on-the-record statement from people who have served with me,
Of course,
worked
Valerie.
with me at Fox News, Concerned Vets, Vets for Freedom, you name it, from the top of the chain to the bottom, who will say, I treat them with respect, with kindness, with dignity. That's men, that's women, that's black, that's white, that's every background. I have prided myself as a leader of respecting people, being professional. That is the balance of mine. I'm not a perfect person, as has been acknowledged. Saved by the grace of God.
That's going to be a
by
quote, they
Jesus
pull.
and Jenny.
I'm not a perfect person.
I'm not a perfect person, but redemption is real.
That'll be
God forged me in ways that I know I'm prepared for. And
In a lot
I'm
of
honored
headlines.
by the people standing and sitting behind me, and look forward to leading this Pentagon on behalf of the warfighters.
Thank you,
There's a
Mr.
difference
Hegseth.
between not being perfect
Frankly, I'm
and
sure there are millions of
being
Americans
flawed.
watching who would agree that they've experienced that same sort of redemption. So I do appreciate that. I realize that it involves a little bearing of the soul, but thank you for that. Now let's talk about top-line defense spending. I have a plan. I think you've read it. I've issued another plan.
Okay, so-
Freedom's Forge, which you've also had a chance to look at. And you have noted correctly that the current trend line of defense spending falling below
I'm not a perfect
3%
person.
of our GDP is a threat
Okay.
to national
Never mind.
security. You also said building the strongest and most powerful military in the world must be done responsibly, but it cannot be done on the cheap. You still agree with that, do you not?
Yes, sir, I do.
Pete was like, I'll
Tell
consider
us
not
what you
drinking
think
if I'll
about,
get the job.
particularly
He's-
about
he's like,
my
no offense to
plan
him.
to make the Defense
All right, so the
Department,
Republicans are not going to ask hard
less
questions.
bureaucratic, less top-heavy, cut out
It's
some
the-
of the
it's the
bureaucracy
Democrats who
and
will.
layers, make it more friendly to startups and to new ideas, contained in my 20 or so page white paper defending Freedom's Forge.
Senator, I've had a chance to review the Forged Act, that paper. Those are precisely the kinds of ideas that need to be pursued. And I look forward to working with this committee to ensure we cut the red tape, we incentivize innovation, we rebuild the defense industrial base, cut out the bureaucracy, all the things that are preventing the platforms and the tools from getting rapidly from our great defense companies here that should, and those that want to compete, into the hands of warfighters. But past his prologue on this, sir, and I would just look at
Cheers, everyone.
what President Trump did after
This
the
is coffee,
drawdowns
though.
of lead from behind
Sorry, Pete.
under President Obama. President Trump rebuilt our military. He didn't start wars, he ended them, and he didn't allow wars to start on his watch. We've had the same kind of defense cuts under the Biden administration. And so, look, I would present to the committee the reputation of President Donald Trump and me coming alongside him to ensure we have peace through strength by rebuilding our military, investing as necessary. Going under 3%, Mr. Chairman, is very dangerous.
Okay, we got 45 seconds. Tell us, in that point, get us started at least talking about deterring China in the Indo-Pacific.
It starts with priorities. The 2017 National Defense Strategy was the first step in reorienting away from simply entanglement in the Middle East, which our generation knows a lot about, and reorienting the behemoth that is the Pentagon toward new priorities, specifically the Indo-Pacific. So that strategy has started and was barely followed through on under the Biden administration. So we're going to start by ensuring the institution understands that as far as threats abroad, the CCP is front and center, also obviously defending our homeland as well.
Thank you very much, Senator Reid. You're recognized.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Before I begin my questioning, I would like to make 3 requests. First, many of my members would like a second
All right, here we go.
round. That has been the custom.
The Dem.
Senator Hagel was afforded 3 rounds. Senator Ash Carter, 2 rounds. And that was done by a Republican chairman with the consent and the appropriate guidance of Democrats. I must say, too, my recollection is I've never denied anyone the opportunity to ask the second round of questions as I chaired. I would request the second round. And my time is running. I think these are administrative.
Oh, yeah, you're using your time. No, if the timekeeper will pause the time.
So old.
I must say, I think we're going to have adequate time for questioning. And I know Democrat members have coordinated their questions as much as we have. And
Yes,
we
hit
are
the like
following
button. It really does
the
help.
Same exact precedent.
It's such a simple thing you can do,
on
and it
all
boosts
things
it.
that we did with Secretary Austin.
It boosts
So,
the stream.
I,
So yes, thank
I,
you, Wendy.
I respectfully understand what you're saying, but I think we have an agreement. It's been known for quite some time, and I intend to stick with that agreement which we made last December. What is your second request?
Second, as been publicly reported, you and I have both seen the FBI background investigation of Mr. Hegseth. And I want to say for the record, I believe the investigation was insufficient, frankly. There are still FBI obligations to talk to people. They have not had access to the forensic audit, which I referenced to, and the person who had access to was quite critical of Mr. Hegseth. And I think people on both sides have suggested that they get the report. I know your colleagues have asked for it. Senator Thune assured me personally that he thought it was an appropriate idea. So I would ask, and I would say too, as a precedent.
So here's
one of
here's how this
President Trump's
works.
appointees had similar,
There's this
very
hearing that's
complicated,
gonna happen today.
personal issues.
No
The report
voting
was
happens
made
today,
available to
okay?
all the members of the committee. We
And
would be
then-
following precedent, and I ask that that be made possible.
Again,
Later, this committee
we
meets
are-
to vote. If he makes
There's
it
been
past
much
the committee
discussion
vote,
about
it goes
this.
to the Senate,
and
and then the full
what
Senate
I
votes.
intend to do is follow
So there's a
the
lot-
exact
there's a lot of
precedent that
steps.
we've had for the last 2
This is just the
hearings
beginning.
with regard to secretaries of defense. Not only Secretary Austin, but Secretary Mattis 8 years ago. And that was for the chair and the ranking member.
I'll
to
post this
see
on my. I haven't
the
even posted
report.
this.
And
Let me
so,
post this live stream.
That is my intention as chair of this committee.
Finally, Mr. Chairman, I have several letters that I would include for the record. One from Count Every Hero, which is an organization of retired 4-star generals and former secretaries of defense that is critical of the proposed purge panels. One from an organization for domestic violence. One for a Council on American Relations. And also several letters that raise questions. I would ask they be submitted for the record.
Without objection, they will be submitted. And Mr. Reid, your time has now expired. Just kidding. You're recognized for 7 minutes.
Thank you. You're a very understanding chairman. I like that. I like that. Ms. Hegseth, you've written, and it's quote, "Oh yeah, and fire any general who hasn't carried water for Obama and Biden's extra constitution and agenda-driven transformation for our military. Clean house and start over." It's come to my attention that current serving military personnel have received emails threatening them with being fired for supporting the current DoD policies. One mail that was sent to a military officer with the subject line, "Clean house," reminiscent of your specific comment, states, and I quote, "With the incoming administration looking to remove disloyal, corrupt, traitorous, liberal officers such as yourself, we will certainly be putting your name into the list of those personnel to be removed. We know you support the woke DEI policies and will ensure you never again influence anyone in the future. You and the redacted spouse's name will be lucky if you're able to collect your military requirement," end quote. Now, I want to remind everyone that these policies that are being referred to date back decades, to the 1940s and 50s, with respect to racial discrimination particularly, and administrations of both parties, including the Trump administration and their first party, caused those policies to be enforced. Mr. Hegseth, are you aware of these emails being sent to officers?
Senator, you mentioned the word accountability, which is something we have not had for the last 4 years.
Are you aware of these messages being sent to officers?
Certainly, I'm not aware of that. It's not one of my efforts, but there's been no accountability for
Excuse me.
the disaster of the withdrawal in
Oh, here we go.
Afghanistan. And that's precisely why we're here today.
Pivoting.
Is that leadership
No, we're not talking.
has
We're talking
been
about the
unwilling
emails.
to take accountability. It's the time to restore that to our
Uh-oh.
most senior ranks.
You've written publicly that DI policy is a distraction and have military personnel walking on eggshells. Do you believe that emails like that are essentially threatening both a serving officer and a spouse and claiming that they'll lose their pension will have a distraction and detract from the lethality?
Senator, you mentioned the 40s and 50s, and you're precisely right. The military was a forerunner in courageous racial integration in ways no other institutions were willing to do. I served with men
Not
and women
answering
of
the
all
question.
backgrounds because of the courage
Trying to run at the clock.
of people
Do you
decades and
believe,
decades ago.
Mr.
Incredibly
Hegseth,
important.
please, do you mean-
However,
please,
the
do you-
DEI policies of today are not the
already a
same
train
as
wreck.
what happened back then. They're dividing troops inside formations, causing commanders to walk on eggshells, not putting meritocracy first. That's the indictment that's made by those serving right now.
Excuse me.
And why we're having this
Excuse me.
conversation.
All of your public comments don't talk about meritocracy. They talk about liberal democratic efforts that are destroying the military, that those people are our enemies. That's not meritocracy. That's a political view. And
This
your
guy's doing a good
goal,
job,
as I see
the Senator.
emerging, is to politicize the military in favor of your particular positions, which you've outlined extensively, which would be the worst blow to the professionalism of the United States military and would undercut readiness, undercut retention, because I can see officers receiving these emails beginning to wonder very seriously
Thank you,
if they
Donna.
should continue. Let me change subject for a moment here.
Not bad for 40.
You've been instrumental in securing pardons for several convicted war criminals. In at least 2 of these cases, the military personnel who served in combat with these convicted service members were not supportive of the pardons. They did their duty as soldiers to report war crimes. Your definition of lethality seems to embrace those people who do commit war crimes, rather than those who stand up and say, this is
Oh,
not
he's
right.
pissed.
So what's the response to your service members who personally witnessed these and courageously reported them to their superiors?
Senator, as someone who's led men in combat directly and had to make very difficult decisions, I've thought very deeply about the balance between legality and lethality, ensuring that the men and women on the front lines have the opportunity to destroy with and close the enemy, and that lawyers aren't the ones getting in the way. I'm not talking about disavowing the laws of war. or the Geneva Conventions or the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Sir, I'm talking about restrictive rules of engagement that these men and women behind me understand they've lived with on the battlefield, which has made it more difficult to defeat our enemies. In many of the cases you're talking about in particular, sir, there was evidence withheld, there was prosecutorial misconduct, and as someone who looks case by case and defaults to the warfighter, to the men and women with dust on their boots, not the second guessers in air-conditioned
loves to say
offices
dust
in
on your
Washington,
boots.
D.C.
Excuse me,
I look case by case and was proud to work with President Trump to understand those cases and ensure that our warriors are always looked out for.
Those cases were adjudicated by who? People in Washington or fellow non-commissioned officers who had also served, sacrificed, and believed in the ethic of the military? Who were the court-martial?
Senator, in multiple cases, they were actually acquitted,
In
but
some
charges
cases,
lingered.
yes,
Regardless of where those
some were
competing
convicted.
authorities were, yes, sir.
Some were.
Can't answer a
but
question.
Others were convicted, and you asked for pardon. That's the only reason you asked for pardon, because they were convicted. But the other factor, too, is you've already
Hog sweat.
disparaged in writing the Geneva Convention, the rules of law, all of these things. How will you be able to effectively lead a military in which one of the principal elements is discipline, respect for lawful authority? You have made statements to your platoon after being briefed by a JAG officer. Well, by the way, would you explain what a JAG-off is?
I don't think I need to, sir,
Why not?
because the men and women watching understand.
Well, perhaps some of my colleagues don't understand.
I don't think I need to answer your
It would be a JAG
question.
officer who puts his or her own priorities in front of the warfighters. Their promotions, their medals, in front of having the backs of those who are making the tough calls on the front lines.
Thank
That's
you,
not
Senator
JAG.
Reed.
Interesting.
Thank you, Senator
Thank you
Reed.
very much.
Senator
Wow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome,
That was
Mr.
not
Hegseth,
good.
to you and to your family. Thank you for the meeting that we had. We talked about a number of things. First and foremost was that
He's a
nuclear
jag-off.
weapons are foundational to our national
Wow.
defense. And having a safe, effective, and credible nuclear deterrent underpins our alliances, and as you know, it deters our adversaries. Nuclear deterrence has been, and you
Isn't
and
a
I
JAG
believe,
officer
agreed
like,
on this. It
it's
must
an attorney in the
continue to be
military, right?
unequivocally the highest priority mission of the Department of Defense.
He clearly
But
does not have the
deterrence only
temperament for this.
works if our adversaries believe our nuclear forces are effective and credible. All three legs of our triad are undergoing that generational
Wow.
recapitalization
Scary.
programs, and we cannot afford any more delays in those programs. Sir, do you believe and agree with President Trump's 2018 nuclear posture review that preventing adversary nuclear attacks is, quote, the highest priority of the United States?
Senator, yes, I do.
If confirmed, will you commit to supporting all three legs of the nuclear triad and to using every tool available to deliver these systems on schedule?
Senator, yes, I do, because ultimately, our deterrence, our survival is reliant upon the capability, the perception, and the reality of the capability of our nuclear triad. We have to invest in its modernization for the defense of our nation.
While former secretaries of defense have stated that nuclear deterrence is the highest priority, we haven't really seen that translated into budget requests.
By the way, are you all
or using
subscribed?
the
If you're not
tools like the
subscribed,
Defense Production Act.
subscribe.
You've
We're
spoken
trying to
about
hit
increasing
500,000 subscribers
lethality.
this year.
You've spoken
So you
about
could help-
getting
you could help
programs
us
done faster.
get to that goal.
How would you actually implement a culture change so that we can see these delivery schedules move forward, be rewarded? I can tell you in most every briefing we have, the schedules we're on are too late. So what would you do?
Thank you, Dark Angel.
Ultimately focused first on the things that are most important, as we have discussed, Senator, the nuclear
Thank you,
triad,
Kate.
understanding whether it's the
Unsubscribe.
B-21
No, we love our
or the Minuteman
unscrubbed-
to the Sentinel,
unscrubbed,
all
unsubbed
aspects of the
friends.
Columbia-class submarines, ballistic missiles.
But
What
we
are the
definitely would
priorities
love
that
to
need to be
get a
focused
sub.
on and ensure that in those particular cases, you mentioned it, Senator, the Defense Production Act, emergency powers. If we're at a place where our nuclear capabilities are perceived to not be what they are, that is an emergency. And we have an ally in our incoming commander-in-chief, in President Donald Trump, who has spoken about these things, understands the power and strength of nuclear deterrence, will not
But
allow them
it's the
to be
existential
deprioritized.
threat. It's the existential
love the
threat to
unsubbed.
this nation. How do you change the
But sub.
how do you change the culture? It's not just the Production Act that's going to be able to do it. How are you going to move forward faster?
Competition, Senator, is important, critically important. The Death Valley that was talked about,
Thanks,
leveraging
Josh.
the innovation of Silicon Valley, which for the first time in generations has shown a willingness, desire, and capability to bring its best technologies to bear at the Pentagon, a Pentagon that has become too insular, tries to block new technologies from coming in. So we have to embrace that, there's some great Office of Strategic Capital, DIU initiatives that provide loans to companies to participate, because you have to invest in the defense industrial base for the longer term projects. We have the capability, the missiles and the munitions, but also to rapidly field emerging technologies that we need on the battlefield right now. So as we learn things, say in the war in Ukraine, those technologies, as we look at threats we're gonna face, find ways to rapidly
It
field
feels
those
like
using
Sarah
off-the-shelf
Palin.
technologies or
It feels
standard
like Sarah
designs,
Palin.
modular designs.
Completely unqualified
Another
person
easy one, Senator,
who
that became
is
evident in the
camera
process
ready,
is digital designs.
has been given a script, knows
The
how to read
Pentagon
the script,
often builds entire systems
when
without first
he
using
gets
a
pressed,
digital design.
it's not good.
Okay.
Which means you build prototypes and then scrap them and start over again. No private sector business
you, Jose.
could survive doing business that way. So
It
there's a
feels
lot of
just like
innovation,
Palin.
and I'm going to hire a lot of smart people, already have, to
Okay.
help with that.
In the 2025 NDAA, it was established to a new position, the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Nuclear Deterrence, Chemical and Biological Defense Policy and Programs. And that was established so we could cut through a lot of the bureaucratic stovepipes that we see in the office of the Secretary of Defense. If confirmed, will you direct the Department of Defense components to
Is that water or
expeditiously
vodka?
implement this reform?
It sounds, I would want to look directly
is
at
great.
exactly what that reform is.
It is
I
great.
take your word that it's great, Senator. I will review it robustly, and I look forward to implementing it.
Okay, thank you. During the first Trump administration, the 2018 Nuclear Posture Review concluded that the U.S. needed to once again develop and deploy a nuclear-armed sea-launched cruise missile known as SLICM to offset significant Russian and Chinese advantages in theater-range nuclear capabilities. Since then, Congress, on a strong bipartisan basis, has directed the Navy and the National Nuclear Security Administration to continue this effort. Do you support the SLICM program?
As of right now, Senator, based on what I know, I do, but one of my answers I'll have repeatedly throughout this morning is getting an opportunity to look under the hood, classified material, get an understanding of true capabilities vis-a-vis enemy capabilities. Because what we know right now on the
Thank you,
nuclear,
Maverick, for the
what I know on the nuclear
$5.
side is that Russia and China are rushing
Agreed. It is
to
a shame,
modernize and
but I'm
build
glad
arsenals
we
larger
can
than ours.
experience the shame
We need to
together.
match threats to capabilities.
get a round of
and
applause
the
for Maverick.
systems we
Thank you,
elevate
Maverick.
will
It's
be
so nice of
tied
you.
to whether those capabilities are needed based on the adversaries we face. Yes,
Would you ensure that this program is executed according to law?
ma'am. Absolutely, absolutely, Senator.
What, short here, what is your plan to revitalize the industrial base in this country?
Needs to be real short.
Real short.
Serious investment targeted at systems that we truly need by also
So how this
incentivizing
goes,
competition.
There's going to be a
and
Republican and then a
laser focus from the
Democrat.
OSD,
Republican,
from the
Democrat.
Office
So
of
this is
Secretary of
clearly the
Defense, to all
Republican
the
because
particular
they're just
strategic
questions
initiatives
about
to revive them.
process
So it's not just one system.
not
It's multiple systems.
You may want
the
to
cloud around
expand
him.
on that on the record. At this point, my colleagues, I would ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a letter organized by a group called Flag Officers for America, which
So the
has
next person will be a
120
Democrat,
retired
and that's when the
generals and
fireworks will happen.
admirals offering their support.
And it used to
for
be Kamala
Mr.
Harris
Hegseth's
was on this
nomination. I ask
committee.
unanimous consent. Without objection, it is entered into the record. Senator Shaheen.
Good morning, Mr. Hegseth.
Good morning, Senator.
I was pleased when I was contacted on your behalf about meeting before this hearing. I've been on this committee since 2011, and during that time, I voted to confirm 6 nominees to be
Sally.
Secretary of Defense
Thank you.
from 3 administrations, 2 Democratic
Let's
and
get
1
some claps for
Republican.
Sally. Thank you. Some
The
round of
first Trump
applause.
administration. Every one of those nominees met with me and my Democratic colleagues on this committee before the hearing. So, as you can imagine, I was disappointed when no one ever followed up. When we followed up with your office, you were not able to meet. Do you understand that if you're confirmed to be Secretary of Defense, that you will have a responsibility to meet with all members of this committee, not just Republicans?
Senator, I very much appreciate and understand the traditionally bipartisan nature of this committee. Their national defense is not partisan. It should not be about Republicans or Democrats. And so
Thank
I
you.
look forward to working together with you and your colleagues.
Why didn't he meet with her
on
beforehand?
priorities facing this nation. Yes.
I think we would expect that. And one reason that I wanted to meet with you was because I thought it would be really helpful to better understand your views on women in the military. Because you've made a number of surprising statements about women serving in the military.
Oh, here we go.
As recently as November the 7th of 2024 on the Sean Ryan Show, you said, and I quote, "I'm straight up saying that we should not have women in combat roles. It hasn't made us more effective." The quote went on a little longer, but that was the gist of it. That was before you were nominated to be Secretary of Defense.
Wow.
Mr. Hegseth, do you know what percentage of our military is comprised of women?
I believe it's 18 to 20%, Senator.
It's almost 18%, and in fact, DOD's 2023 demographic report indicated that there are more women serving now,
Got his ass.
and there are fewer separations. So they make up a critical part of our military, wouldn't you agree?
Yes, ma'am. Women in our military, as I have said publicly, have and continue to make amazing contributions
Clock
across
it.
all aspects of our battlefield.
Well, you also write in your book, The War on Warriors, with the chapter, The Deadly Obsession with Women Warriors, that, quote, "Not only are women comparatively less effective than men in combat roles, but they are more likely to be objectified by the enemy and their own nation in the moral realms of war." Mr. Hegseth, should we take it to believe that you believe that the 2 women on this committee who have served honorably and with distinction made our military less effective and less capable?
I'm incredibly grateful for the 2 women who've served our military in uniform and including in the Central Intelligence Agency, contributions on the battlefield, indispensable contributions. Senator, I would like to clarify, when I'm talking about that issue, it's not about the capabilities of men and women, it's about standards. And this committee has talked a lot about standards. Standards that we, unfortunately, over time,
Women don't have standards?
seen eroded in certain duty positions, certain schools, certain places, which affects readiness, which is what I care about the most, readiness
I
on the
appreciate
battlefield.
that, and-
so my
but
comments point
however-
time and time again to standards.
Your statements publicly have not been to that effect. After your nomination, you did state to a group of reporters that you, quote, "support all women serving in our military today who do a fantastic job across the globe, including combat." So what I'm confused about, Mr. Hegseth, is which is it? Why should women in our military, if you were the Secretary of Defense, believe that they would have a fair shot and an equal opportunity to rise through the ranks? If on the one
That's right.
hand, you say that women are not competent, they make our military less effective, and on the other hand, you say, oh no, now that I've been nominated to be the Secretary of Defense, I've changed my view on women in the military. What do you have to say to the almost 400,000 women who are serving today about your position on whether they should be capable to rise through the highest ranks of our military?
Senator, I would say I would be honored to have the opportunity to serve alongside you, shoulder to shoulder, men and women, black, white, all backgrounds, with a shared purpose. Our differences are not what define us. Our unity and our
Answer the
shared
question.
purpose is what define us, and you will be treated fairly and with dignity, honor, and respect, just like every man and woman in uniform, just like the men and women that I've worked with in my veterans organizations, to include when I was a headquarters and
Bro,
headquarters
this guy
company
can't get
commander
through.
in the
We
Minnesota
can't get this
National
through.
Guard.
Well,
and
I
we had women in
appreciate
our
your
ranks as
11th
well.
hour conversion. But, Mr.
Oh.
Chairman, for the record, I would like to submit Chapter 5, The Deadly Obsession with Women Warriors, for the record. Mr. Hegseth,
But without objection, it will be
Ooh.
submitted. and
are you
accepted.
familiar
Is
with
it
the
possible
Women,
to get
Peace,
a
and
bruise
Security
from a
agenda
verbal
at the
smacking?
Department of Defense?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
This is a law that was signed during President-elect Trump's first term. It was legislation that I sponsored with Republican Senator Capito of West Virginia. It was co-sponsored by Marco Rubio, the nominee to be the President-elect's Secretary of State. It was led in the House of Representatives by Kristi Noem, the President-elect's nominee to be the Secretary of Homeland Security. It mandates that women be included in all aspects of our national security,
Valerie.
including
Let's get a
conflict
round of applause for
resolution and peace
Valerie
negotiations.
for the $5.
And at
Thank you,
the
Valerie.
Department of Defense, it has been the law for 8 years under both the Trump and Biden administrations. The DoD has incorporated women throughout its decision-making as a result. Every single combatant commander across 2 administrations has told this committee that this law and its implementation at the Department of Defense provides them a strategic advantage operationally. Based on your comments, it appears that the example that you would like to set, not only for women in this country, but for women across the globe,
Call a cop.
50% of the
Amy
world's
Winehouse.
population,
I see you.
as the prospective nominee to lead the most combat-credible military in the entire world, is that women should not have an equal opportunity in our military. So will you commit to preserving the Women, Peace, and Security Law at
See,
DoD,
like, this is not the way
and
you do it.
including in your
I don't
budget
think, Mrs. Shaheen.
the requisite funding to continue
I don't think you ask yes
to
or no questions. It's so
restore and
easy for him to
resource
say
these
yes.
programs throughout the DoD?
It's more like, why should we
Senator, I
believe
will
you?
commit to reviewing that program and ensuring it aligns with America First national security priorities, meritocracy, lethality, and readiness. And if it advances American interests, it's something we would advance. If it doesn't, it's something we would
Well,
look at.
since former President Trump signed the law, I hope that he agrees with you.
Thank you, Senator Shaheen. At this point, I would ask unanimous consent to enter into the record 5 letters of support from female service members and combat veterans who support
Yeah, he'll
Mr.
just lie.
Hegseth's nomination. These women represent diverse viewpoints, from a retired colonel with over 25 years of service to an active duty Navy surface warfare commander to a senior airman. They support Mr. Hegseth and comment on his focus on merit, warfighting readiness, military training status, and the warrior ethos. So without objection, it will be entered into the record. And now I'm honored to recognize Senator Cotton for 7 minutes.
Mr. Hegseth, let's continue on this
Oh,
line
God.
of questioning about what's sometimes referred to as women in combat. I think that phrase is something of a misnomer. Many members of this committee
Jesper, Lynn,
have served
thank
in
you.
combat in the
Thank you for the
last
super
25
chats.
years, to include women and men. I'm sure all those men served with women.
Thank you,
whether
Pete,
they
for
were
the super
military
chat.
police officers, or they were pilots, or whether they were intelligence analysts or medics or what have you. You served. I assume you served with women who were on the front lines as well. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And were those women anything other than skilled, brave, and honorable in their service?
They were some of the best soldiers I worked with.
So
Senator.
women have been serving in combat for a long time. Women have even been serving in combat units like infantry battalions for a long time, in roles like medics or mechanics or what have you. So what we're talking about here specifically is women in ground combat roles in jobs like infantrymen,
He thought there would
or
be
artillerymen,
included commercial
or
breaks.
special forces. Until about 10 years ago,
Cotton
that wasn't the
sucks.
case. Under Secretary Panetta, those roles were opened up to women to serve
He sucks
in.
because he knows better.
Has President Trump indicated at all that he plans to rescind or alter that guidance?
You're correct to point out, Senator, that these are the decisions that the Commander-in-Chief will have the prerogative to make. He has not
Tanya, thank you
indicated
for the
to me
$20.
that he has plans to
Jeez
change
Louise.
whether or not women would have access to these
Let's get a
roles.
round of applause for Tanya. Thank you,
However,
Tanya.
I would point out, ensuring that standards are equal and high is of importance to him and great importance to me. Because in those ground combat roles, what is true is that the weight of the ruck on your back doesn't change. The weight of the 155 round that you have to carry doesn't change. The weight of the 240 Bravo machine gun you might have to carry doesn't
Okay,
change.
y'all are doing these
And so
super
whether
chats
it's
too
a
fast.
man or
So
a
I
woman,
will
they
be
have to meet the
switching between
same
them. I will
high
thank you all at that
standards.
time. I don't
And
want to
Senator,
talk too
in
much.
any place where those things have been
But thank you,
eroded
Barbara.
or in courses, criteria have been changed in order to meet quotas, racial quotas or gender quotas, that is putting a focus on something other than readiness, standards, meritocracy, and lethality. So that's the kind of review I'm talking about, not whether women have access to ground combat.
Okay, so thank you. So you expect no change to that guidance, but as you point out, in these specific jobs, there are irreducible physical demands. We expect our intelligence analysts and our mechanics to be physically fit in the military, but it's different when you're in the infantry or the artillery. You just mentioned a few things. Let me point it out.
Oh, that's
An artillery
kinda
shell weighs
misogynistic.
almost 100 pounds. An Abrams tank round weighs around 50 pounds. The M240 Bravo machine gun with its tripod weighs almost 50 pounds. The average weight of a full kit, ammo, water, commo, body armor for a soldier is over 100 pounds. Nothing you can do can change any of those things, right? That is physical reality.
Go ahead. Yes, Senator. And I would say the requirements to handle those things in a ground combat unit, as far as standards, can look different than those of a medic or a drone pilot. And so it's not that it has to be the same standard throughout, it's standards to maximize efficacy of that particular position.
Let me read a quote here from one Army officer. While it may be difficult for a 120-pound woman to lift or drag 250 pounds, the Army cannot artificially absolve women of that responsibility. It may still exist on the battlefield. The entire purpose of creating a gender-neutral test was to acknowledge the reality that each job has objective physical standards to which all soldiers should be held, regardless of gender. The intent was not to ensure that women and men will have an equal likelihood of meeting those standards. I assume, based on your testimony, you agree with that Army officer?
Absolutely. The standards need to be the same and they need to be high. And they need to be set by the people closest to the problem set, closest to the understanding of what is required by that job. Commanders, commanding officers, and COCOMs and elsewhere who understand the reality of what they face, that's the feedback we should get. That's what should be enshrined and enforced, and no other set of political prerogatives. When I talk about removing politics, ideological or political prerogatives should contribute to those determinations, nothing other than the execution of the mission.
Thank you. For the record, that Army officer was Captain Kristen Griest, the Army's first female infantry officer and one of its first female Ranger School graduates. One final point, you said they need to be objective, gender neutral, and high. That's because the demands are, in fact, very high. The current physical fitness test for the Army has a minimum 2-mile run of 22 miles. Run. And I want the reporter to note that I'm putting run in air quotes, because 22 miles at 2 miles is not running. It may be jogging, it's probably walking fast. Let's move on. We've got a big, 22 minutes. We've got a big audience here. Many of them seem to be patriotic supporters of you, Mr. Hegseth. Some of them seem to be liberal critics of you. I would note that it's only the liberal critics that have disrupted this hearing. As was my custom during the Biden administration, I want to give you a chance to respond to what they said about you. I think the first one accused you of being a Christian Zionist. I'm not really sure why that is a bad thing. I'm a Christian. I'm a Zionist. Zionism is that the Jewish people deserve a homeland in the ancient Holy Land where they've lived since the dawn of history. Do you consider yourself a Christian Zionist?
Senator, I'm a Christian, and I robustly support the state of Israel and its existential defense and the way America comes alongside them as their.
What does being a Christian have to do with leading the
and I think this one
military?
was a member of Code Pink, which, by the way, is a Chinese Communist front group these days, said that you support Israel's war in Gaza. I support Israel's existential war in Gaza. I assume, like me and President Trump, you support that war as well, don't you?
Senator, I do. I support Israel destroying and killing every last member of Hamas.
And the third protester said something about 20 years of genocide. I assume that's our wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Do you think our troops are committing genocide in Iraq and Afghanistan?
Senator, I do not. I think our troops, as you know, as so many in this committee know, did the best they could with what they have. We're not, the outcomes, and tragically, the outcome we saw in Afghanistan under the Biden administration put a stain on that, but it doesn't put a stain on what those men and women did in uniform, as you know full well, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Hegseth.
Thank you, Senator Cotton. At this point, I ask unanimous consent to offer to the record a letter submitted by Omar Abbasi, son of former city council president of Samarra, Iraq, who worked
Okay, so now the
with
Democrats
Mr. Hegseth
next.
in Iraq. Without objection, that will be entered. Senator Gillibrand.
Thank you, Mr.
Oh, here we
Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Hegseth. I do want to thank you for your service, and I want to thank you for your willingness to serve in this capacity.
Thank you, Senator.
I have many concerns about your record, and particularly your public statements, because they are so hurtful to the men and women who are currently serving in the U.S. military, harmful to morale, harmful to good order and discipline. If you are saying that women shouldn't be serving in the military, and I'm going to read you your quotes, because the quotes themselves are terrible. You will have to change how you see women to do this job well, and I don't know if you are capable of that. So I want to press on these issues that my colleague Jean Shaheen brought up, because she said it so well. So first of all, you answered your questionnaire. Do you believe that any American who wants to serve in their country in the military and can meet objective standards set by the military should be allowed to serve without limitation? You've said yes to that question. But then in all of these other circumstances, you've denigrated active duty service members. We have hundreds of women who are currently in the infantry, lethal members of our military serving in the infantry, but you degrade them. You say, we need moms, but not in the military, especially in combat units. So specific to Senator Cotton's question, because Senator Cotton was giving you layups to differentiate between different types of combat. And specifically, as Secretary, would you take any action to reinstitute the combat arms exclusion for female service members, knowing full well you have hundreds of women doing that job right now? And the standards, your 2 mile run, Tom, is about the Army Combat Fitness Test. It is not the requirements to have an MOS 11 Bravo, which is the infantry. These are the requirements today for people serving in the industry, men and women. They are gender neutral, and they are very difficult to meet. They have not been reduced in any way, and our combat units, our infantry is lethal. So please explain specifically, because you will be in charge of 3 million personnel. It is a big job. And when you make these public statements, and I get you were not Secretary of Defense then, I get you were on TV, I get you were helping veterans, I get it was a different job. But most recently, you said this in November of 2024, knowing full well you might have been named as Secretary of Defense. So please explain these types of statements, because they're brutal and they're mean and they disrespect men and women who are willing to die for this country.
Well, Senator, I appreciate your comments, and I would point out I have never disparaged women serving in the military. I respect every single female service member that has put on the uniform, past and present. My critiques, Senator, recently and in the past, and from personal experience, have been instances where I've seen standards lowered, and you mentioned 11 Alpha, 11 Bravo, MOS, places in units, and the book that has been referenced multiple times here, The War on Warriors. I spent months talking to active duty service members, men and women, low ranks, high ranks, combat arms and not combat arms. And what each and every one of them told me, and which personal instances have shown me, is that in ways direct, indirect, overt, and subtle, standards have been changed inside infantry training units, ranger school, infantry battalions, to ensure that
Give me one example. Please give me an example. I get you're making these generalized
meet
statements.
Quotas to have a certain number of female infantry officers or infantry enlisted, and that disparages those women
Commanders
who are
do
incredibly
not have to
capable
meet
of meeting
quotas
that
for the infantry.
standard.
Commanders do not have to have a quota for women in the infantry. That does not exist. It does not exist. And your statements are creating the impression that these exist, because they do not. There are not quotas. We want the most lethal force. But I'm telling you, having been here for 15 years, listening to testimony about men and women in combat and the type of operations that were successful in Afghanistan and in Iraq, women were essential for many of those units. When Ranger units went in to find where the terrorists hiding in Afghanistan or in Iraq, if they had a woman in the unit, they could go in, talk to the women in a village, say, where are the terrorists hiding? Where are the weapons hiding? And get crucial information to make sure that we can win that battle. So you cannot denigrate women in general, and your statements do that. We don't want women in the military, especially in combat. What a terrible statement. So please, do not deny that you've made those statements. You have. We take the responsibility of standards very seriously, and we will work with you. I'm equally distressed. You would not meet with me before this hearing. We could have covered all of this before you came here, so I could get to the 15 other questions that I want to get to. So women, you have denigrated. You have also denigrated members of the LGBTQ community. Did you know that when Don't Ask, Don't Tell was in place, we lost so many crucial personnel, over 1,000 in mission-critical areas. We lost 10% of all our foreign language speakers because of a political policy. You said in your statement, you don't want politics in the DOD. Everything you've said in these public statements is politics.
Oh, he looks
I don't
battered.
want women. I don't want moms. What's wrong with a mom, by the way? Once you have babies, you therefore are no longer able to be lethal? I mean, you're basically saying women, after they have children, can't ever serve in the military in a combat role. It's a silly thing to say. It's a silly thing to say, beneath the position that you are aspiring to. To denigrate LGBTQ service members is a mistake. If you are a sharpshooter, you're as lethal regardless of what your gender identity is, regardless of who you love. So please know this to be a true statement. So you say it was a political thing. You say it undermined us, social engineering. I don't know why someone having to publicly say or not publicly say who they love is social engineering. I think having that policy in the first place was highly problematic. And as you said in your statement, do you agree anybody should be able to serve in the military if they meet the standards?
Senator, as the president has stated, I don't disagree with the overturn of Don't Ask, Don't Tell.
Great, because I don't want you thinking, can't serve if you're a mom, can't serve if you're LGBTQ, and then last, can't serve if you're a leftist. The statements you said about people who have views differently than you, that we're the enemy, are you saying that 50% of the DOD, if they hold liberal views or leftist views or are Democrats, are not welcome in the military? Are you saying that?
Senator, I volunteered to deploy to Afghanistan under Democrat President Barack Obama. I also volunteered to guard the inauguration of Joe Biden, but was denied the opportunity to serve because I was identified as an extremist by my own unit for a Christian tattoo.
Thank you very much. Senator Gillibrand, you held up a document and referred to it during your questioning. Would you like that entered into the record?
Thank you for the $2, Fluffles.
Okay, we'll delete.
We'll submit a clean
See if
copy.
find more of these. Lynn, thank you for the $5.
At the point of your question, and I would like to enter into the record at this point a letter of support.
I think there were a couple
from
more I
retired Air
missed.
Force
I'm sorry.
Colonel Melissa Cunningham. Colonel Cunningham supports Mr. Hegseth and mentions his warrior ethos, combat effectiveness, and maintaining military training standards. So without objection, both of those will be admitted, and I now
See if I can find
recognize
you the other
Senator
ones.
Rounds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, good morning. I'd like to thank you for your service to our nation in uniform and also your work on behalf of your fellow veterans and for your willingness to enter into this maelstrom of public service. I think the presence of so many veterans who have showed up to support you speaks volumes. I also want to recognize your family service and sacrifice.
Thank you for the 4,600 of you who are watching with us. This is awesome.
Not just the man that enters the
this
arena,
is terrible,
but it's the entire family who
but you are
also
awesome.
Works their
This
way
is
through
terrible.
This process
You are
as
awesome.
well. I appreciated our meeting with you and with your wife Jennifer this last month. I thought that we had an excellent conversation, and I appreciate your statement and your answers to the advanced policy questions especially your desire to bring a renewed focus on warfighting and lethality back to the Pentagon. I also respect and I appreciate my friend and colleague, Senator Gillibrand, and some of her questions, and I know that she had a number of them in there. You had an opportunity to respond very briefly. Were there any other responses
Amanda.
that you would like to make or clarifications that you would like to
Krista,
make before I move on to my questions?
5 months, holy
Senator,
crap.
thank you very much for the opportunity to meet and for the question.
Congrats on the 250K.
I would also acknowledge.
Great work, and you were
You
awesome.
were mentioning
Thank you,
female
Krista.
engagement teams, which have shown a great deal of success on the battlefield.
That's
It
so
would be,
nice.
And universally acknowledged as such. I've been in Iraqi homes where the language and gender barrier was real, and the ability to have someone there to help in that process would be a massive accelerant in mission success. So I recognize that reality. I also recognize that female engagement teams assigned to a SEAL team or a Green Beret team meet different standards also, which is okay because of the duty positions involved in that job. As far as politics, Senator, it has been the joy of my life to lead men and women in military outfits. When you're in combat or in training, there's a lot of conversations that happen. And you start to realize that a lot of people you're serving with share your political ideals or they don't. You find out there's Republicans, there's Democrats, there's Libertarians, there's Independents, there's Vegetarians, everything in between. None of that matters. It never mattered in how I led men and women, how I interacted with them, what missions we undertook. Politics has nothing to do with the battlefield.
Bro
Which is why
said women
President
should
Trump
not
has
be in the military.
asked me to say, let's make sure all of that comes out. This
That's
is
what he
about
said.
warfighting capability, setting standards high, and making sure we give our boys, our men and women, everything they need to be successful on the battlefield. So politics can play no part in that, and I look forward to infusing that, as we always have inside our units.
I appreciate you making that very clear. And one of the areas that we want to do our best is to provide for the equipment and the technical capabilities so that no young man or woman enters into a battle
Boys.
as a fair
Good-
fight.
good
That
catch.
They always have the advantage. Those are the types of questions that I'd like to get into right now. And I want to start by talking about something that sometimes gets a little bit into the weeds, but I think it's critical.
Yep.
Mr. Hegseth, from what I've heard from 24 senior DOD officials in hearings over the last 2 years, including the Secretary of Defense, every service chief, and 8 combatant commanders, is that sharing the portion of the spectrum, and this is in the weeds, I know, but I'm going to ask it to get it on the record, the 3.1 to 3.5 gigahertz band would have extremely serious consequences and very costly consequences on our warfighting capabilities. In fact, the Department of the Navy alone has estimated that relocating their systems to a different part of the spectrum band would cost them $250 billion. That's just for the destroyers that defend our coasts with the radars that they have in them. If confirmed, what will you do to make sure that the Department of Defense can maintain its access to and the use and to be able to maneuver within the electromagnetic spectrum at home and abroad? And would you be willing to literally go to the mat with the interagency to protect warfighter requirements
I mean, I'm just like,
for the use of the spectrum?
Well, Senator, thank you for the question. And my job, in part, will be to go to the mat when necessary for things I believe are an absolute requirement for the Department of Defense and the men and women in uniform.
Joni
There's no
Ernst
doubt
will
about
be
that.
the interesting one because
In
she has
this
said she
particular
does
case, as
not
far as
like this
spectrum,
guy
I look forward, as I've
on
said
the
before,
Republican side.
getting a full class of, because this issue has come up a number of times in meetings. It's critically important with how our warfighters communicate across all services. So I'm going to get a classified briefing immediately about what that would, how it would impact the spectrum if it were to allow other companies or it to be
Rest
auctioned
assured,
off. So we have to know.
China would love to have our ability to use that part of the spectrum restricted. They would
And
love that.
Absolutely right. And so I will go in with eyes only toward ensuring we have the capabilities we need and there's no disruption when I take that brief.
Thank you. In your advanced policy questions, you recognize a cooperative approach by China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea to undermine U.S. influence around the world. As you point out, aggression by any one
It's
actor
very
would
scary.
be an
It's very
opportunity
scary.
for others to engage the U.S. on multiple fronts
But when I'm
along
scared,
the
you know what I do?
continuum of the conflict.
I get my
As we
dog.
discussed in my office, neither of us wants to send our troops into a fair fight. We want to make sure that they have every advantage that the United States can give them, and that requires resources and
Zuki
reforms.
Cam.
Given the growing potential of a multi-theater conflict involving near-peer adversaries, what steps would you take to prepare the Department of Defense to simultaneously execute and sustain operations across multiple regions while maintaining readiness and deterrence globally? And I just have to make note, and I want to make it clear, we have language in this year's fiscal year 2025 National Defense Authorization Act calling for a review of the department's operational plans. And I just want to make sure that you're aware of that, and that we will have, if we have a fight with one,
She was
chances
sleeping.
are very good
She's like, what
that
the-
we're going to
she's like,
have
what the
two
fuck? Why'd you
battles
wake me up?
or two different battlegrounds
Yes,
at the
that's how you
same
spell
time.
it.
Senator, which is why I believe our country's incredibly fortunate to have a new commander-in-chief in Donald Trump, who through the strategic approach he has taken with allies and against foes
That's okay.
has prevented wars and is determined to do the same. That's our chief job, is deter and prevent wars. My job, should I be confirmed at the Secretary of Defense, is to ensure we have the right prioritization of assets and strategy, and then the tools in the toolbox
Your dog is more
necessary.
qualified than Hegseth,
The pointiest
LOL.
possible spear for President Trump to wield if necessary as the last resort. So President Trump at the helm, I think, will go a long way in making sure our enemies know there's a new sheriff in town.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And thank you very much, Senator Blumenthal.
Here we go.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for having this hearing. Thank you for being here, Mr. Hegseth. And I want to join in expressing appreciation and respect for your service to our country, and thanks to all the veterans who are here today, and thank you for your service as the ranking member of the Veterans Affairs Committee. I hope we can focus on doing better for our veterans and doing better in management of the Department of Defense. There's always room for improvement. I think what we need in that position is not just better, but the best in financial management, because those decisions are life and death decisions affecting the 3.4 million Americans who serve our national security and our national defense and put their lives on the line. I want to talk about financial mismanagement at the two organizations that you headed, which are the only test of your financial management that we have before this committee,
different.
Veterans for Freedom and Concerned Veterans for America. You took over the Veterans for Freedom in 2007. In 2008, you raised $8.7 million, but spent more than $9 million, creating a deficit. By January 2009, you told donors that the organization had less than $1,000 in the bank and debts of $434,000.
Wow.
By 2010, revenue at the Veterans for Freedom had dropped to about $265,000. In the next year, it had dropped further to $22,000. You don't dispute these numbers, do you?
Senator, I'm extremely proud of the work me and my fellow vets did at Vets for Freedom. A bunch of young vets with no political experience, a small group, working hard
I
every
apologize
single
for
day.
interrupting.
We raised donor funds. And and we have letters submitted for the record from almost everyone that worked with me every single day, including our chief operating officer, who will attest that every dollar we raised was used intentionally toward the execution of our mission, which is supporting the warfighters, exactly why we're here today, the warfighters in the Iraq surge. There was a campaign in 2008, Senator.
If
Barack Obama
I
versus
can
John
just
McCain.
ask you another
We believe
question,
John McCain would be the right
because
person
I
to
have
win, and so we spent
the tax
more.
returns from that organization.
I'm glad they're for the record.
I'm going
That's
to ask
weird.
to be entered into the record.
Did you hear that?
Mr. Chairman?
I think
Without
that's them,
objection.
not me.
These tax returns are yours. They have your signature.
All right, we're going to a different.
They involve whistleblowers, non-disclosure agreements, and anonymous, although numerous, sources, including those who have faced
I kinda
political
like it.
intimidation
Wait.
for sharing their experiences. I hope you will address each of these allegations thoroughly
Wait.
and truthfully.
That's old. Sorry, everyone. All right, let's go to this one.
Would presumably document, it should have documented, this kind of financial mismanagement. And these are the 990s from that organization. By the year of 2011, donors had become so dissatisfied with that mismanagement, they, in effect, ousted you. They merged that organization with Military Families United, and thereafter, you joined a second organization as executive director.
In
the
between,
Concerned
Senator, I went
Veterans.
to Harvard
I want to
University
ask
for 2
you
years and
questions.
Afghanistan.
Yeah, I'm
I
doing
want to ask
CrossFit
you
later.
questions about Concerned Veterans for America. Again, another set of tax returns, the 990s from that organization. I ask they be made part of the record, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection, both of those returns are now part of the record.
2011 to 2016. At the end of 2013, shortfall of $130,000. At the end of 2014, shortfall of $428,000. You had a surplus the following year, but then another deficit of $437,000. By the time you left, that organization had deep debts, including credit card transaction debts of about $75,000. That isn't the kind of fiscal management we want at the Department of Defense. We can't tolerate it at the Department of Defense. That's an organization with a budget of $850 billion, not 10 or 15 million, which was the case at those two organizations. And it has command responsibility for 3.4 million Americans. The highest number that you managed in those two organizations was maybe 50 people. Let me ask you, how many men and women now serve in the United States Army? What is Sen's strength?
Senator, I would like an opportunity to respond to
Well,
the
I've asked you a
impugning of
question.
my
How many-
leadership of
how
a
many men
veterans
and women
organization. Concerned
currently
Veterans for
serve?
America. You're on the VA committee, sir, and I
God.
appreciate your service there. The VA Accountability Act and the Mission Act were all brainchilds of Concerned Veterans for America. We used our donor money very intentionally and focused to create policy that bettered the lives of veterans.
Mr. Hegseth, I'm asking you a very simple question. How many men and women currently serve in the United States Army?
Senator, the United States Army, 450,000 on active duty, sir.
And how many in the Navy?
And the Navy is 425, sir.
Well, it's 337 this year. How many in the Marine Corps?
175,000, sir.
172,300. Those numbers dwarf
Wow.
any experience you
Got it
have
wrong.
by many multiples. I don't believe that you can tell this committee or the people of America that you are qualified to lead them. I would support you as the spokesperson for the Pentagon. I don't dispute your communication skills, but I believe that
We're
we
cha-
are
we're changing
entitled
feeds.
to the fact.
Sorry. This is better.
172,300.
That's much better.
Those numbers dwarf any experience you had by many multiples. I don't believe that you can tell this committee or the people of America that you are qualified to lead them. I would support you as the spokesperson for the Pentagon. I don't dispute your communication skills, but I believe that we are entitled to the facts here. I've asked for more documents. I assume you'd be willing to submit to an expanded FBI background check
He looks hungover.
that interviews your colleagues, accountants, ex-wives, former spouses, sexual assault survivors, and others, and enable them to come forward.
Senator, I'm not in charge of FBI background checks.
but you would submit to it and support it.
I'm not in charge of FBI background checks.
Thank you,
one answer.
Senator Blumenthal. I at
Crazy.
this point want to submit a letter.
Real quick, if you are new here, hello. If you can subscribe, that would really help the channel. If you are new, hello. My name's Keith. I do YouTube. Hello.
2008 financial crisis dried up fundraising for nonprofits. Captain Zirkle says, and I quote, Pete responded to this crisis with decisive action by reducing staff and renegotiating all debts with
Thank you for
creditors
subbing.
until they were fairly
Thank you.
resolved. An impressive
It helps a lot.
feat and a testament to Pete's character. Pete departed VFF in 2010 to take on a new role with Concerned Veterans for America. Pete departed on good terms. Without objection, that will be added to the record.
Welcome,
Senator
Gigi.
Ernst, you are recognized
yeah.
for
Yes.
7 minutes.
Oh, now
Thank you,
this is gonna be
Mr. Chair,
interesting.
and I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a letter submitted by Mr. Mark Lucas,
So we will know whether or not he's getting through with this.
and Iowa Army National Guard member. Mr. Lucas and I served together in the Iowa Army National Guard. He succeeded Pete Hegseth as Executive Director of Concerned Veterans for America. And in his letter, Mr. Lucas says that Mr. Hegseth, quote, laid a strong foundation that postured CVA for long-term success, end quote. And that Mr. Hegseth, quote, continued to be an invaluable asset to both me as a leader and the organization, end quote. So I would ask for unanimous consent to enter this Washington Times article and the letter from Mr. Mark Lucas into the record.
Without objection.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Mr. Hegseth, and
Good
thank
morning,
you very
Senator.
much. I appreciate your service to our nation. It's something that I know you are very proud of, and it is something that we have in common and that we share. You and I have had many productive conversations. And just for our audience, we have had very frank conversations. Is that correct, Mr. Hegseth?
Senator, that is a correct characterization.
You know that I don't keep anything hidden, pull no punches. My colleagues know that as well. So I do appreciate you sitting down and allowing me the opportunity to question you thoroughly on those issues that are of great importance to me. Just to recap those issues, 3 that are very important. One is the DOD and making sure that we have a clean audit. The second is women in combat, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. And the third was maintaining high standards and making sure that we are combating sexual assault in the military. Okay, so Mr. Hegseth, I'm going to address the issue because this will tie into some of the financial concerns that have been raised here as well. And it's why, you know, I, trusting my fellow Iowan, asked for unanimous consent of his letter to go into the record. But like me, a lot of Iowans are really, really concerned and upset about the wasteful Washington spending and of course, in our Pentagon. It's an issue that I have been combating
Thank
for
you,
years.
Rescue Puppy, for the membership.
So there's
Thank you.
significant room for greater efficiency and cost cutting within the department. And the DOD is the only federal agency
Thank you,
that
Suspect
has
Zero.
never passed an audit. As the Senate Doge Caucus Chair and founder, that's unacceptable to me, and it should be unacceptable to you as well.
Did she just
So I
say
appreciate
Senate
that you
Doge
mentioned that in your
Caucus member?
opening statement. What are those steps that you will take to ensuring the Pentagon has a clean audit by the year 2028?
Senator, I appreciate your work on this topic, which you've been involved in for a long time. You mentioned Concerned Veterans for America.
Katie.
I just want to clarify, we have very generous donors who set a very clear budget that we stuck to every single year. So the latitude there was restricted, and we worked very hard and diligently inside it. You've also been a leader on the Pentagon audit for a very long time. I think when we
All right, it feels like this man's gonna get through if that's where Joni Ernst is. Let's keep watching.
audit, because an audit is an issue of national security and frankly, respect to American taxpayers who give $850 billion over to the Defense Department. and expect that we know where that money goes. And if that money is going somewhere that doesn't add to tooth and instead goes to fat or tail, we need to know that. Or if it's
Thanks,
wasted,
Krista.
we need to know that. So I think previous secretaries of defense, with all due respect, haven't necessarily
It is
emphasized
crazy he's going to get
the
confirmed.
strategic prerogative of an audit. And myself, my deputy SecDef, and others already know that a Pentagon audit will be the comptroller, others, central to ensuring we find those dollars that can be used elsewhere legally under the law inside the Pentagon. So you have my word, it will be a priority.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to women in combat, and I had
Thank
the
you for
privilege of
subscribing, Mark.
serving in uniform for over 23 years. Between our Army Reserves and our Iowa Army National Guard, did serve in Kuwait and missions in Iraq. And so it is incredibly important that I stress, and I hope that if confirmed, you continue to stress, that every
always is like
man
giving
and
it-
woman
it's like a give and
has
a take, like, do I
opportunity
talk, do I not talk
to
when you're
serve
doing
their
these things, so.
country in uniform and do so at any level, as long as they are meeting the standards that are set forward. And we talked about that in my office. I do believe in high standards. Now, I was denied the opportunity to serve in any combat role because I have a lot of gray hair. And the policy has changed since then, okay? So I've been around for quite a while.
Suspect zero,
But
thank you for
the young
becoming a
women
member.
that are out there now and can meet those standards, and again, I'll emphasize, they should be very, very high standards. They must physically be able to achieve those standards so that they can complete their mission. But I want to know, again, let's make it very clear for everyone here today. As Secretary of Defense, will you support women continuing to have the opportunity to serve in combat roles?
Senator, first of all, thank you for your service, as we discussed extensively as well.
It's my privilege.
And my answer is yes, exactly the way that you caveated it. Yes, women will have access to ground combat roles, given the standards remain high, and we'll have a review to ensure the standards have not been eroded in any one of these cases. That'll be part of one of the first things we do at the Pentagon, is reviewing that in a gender-neutral way, the standards, ensuring
He has no
readiness,
qualifications for this.
and meritocracy is
This is
front and center.
crazy.
But absolutely, it would be the privilege of a lifetime to, if confirmed, to be the Secretary of Defense for all men and women in uniform who fight so heroic. They have so many other options. They decide to put their right hand up for our country, and it would be an honor to have a chance to lead them.
Thank you. And just very briefly, we only have less than a minute left, but we have also discussed this in my office. A priority of mine has been combating sexual assault in the military and making sure that all of our service members are treated with dignity and respect. This has been so important. Senator Gillibrand and I have worked on this, and we were able to get changes made to the Uniform Code of Military Justice to make sure that we have improvements and on how we address the tragic and life-altering issues of rape, sexual assault. It will demand time and attention from the Pentagon under your watch
wild.
if you are confirmed. So as Secretary of Defense, will you appoint a senior level official dedicated
Man accused
to
of sexual assault
prevention
multiple
and
times,
response?
Credible,
Senator, as we have
being
discussed,
asked how he
yes,
can
I
stop
will.
sexual assault in the military.
Okay, and my time has expired. Thank you for your answers.
Senator Hirono.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hegseth,
Wild.
welcome.
Thank you.
I am focused on your fitness to serve, including your character and temperament and your overall qualifications to do the job. And I do appreciate the comments of Ranking Member Reed with his concerns regarding your nomination, because I share those concerns. As part of my responsibility as a member of this committee to ensure the fitness of all nominees to come before any of the committees on which I sit, I ask the following two initial questions. First, since you became a legal adult, have you ever made unwanted requests for sexual favors or committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature?
No, Senator.
Have you ever faced discipline or entered into a settlement relating to this kind of conduct?
Senator, I was falsely accused in October of 2017.
That's a yes.
It was fully investigated, and
That's
it
a
was
yes.
completely cleared.
I don't think completely cleared is accurate, but the fact is that your own lawyer said that you entered into an NDA and paid a person who accused you of raping her a sum of money to make sure that she did not file a complaint. Moving on. As Secretary, you will be in charge of maintaining good order and discipline by enforcing the Uniform Code of Military Justice, UCMJ. In addition to the sexual assault allegations, and by the way, the answer to my second question should have been yes. I have read multiple reports of your regularly being drunk at work, including by people who worked with you at Fox News. Do you know that being drunk at work is prohibited for service members under the UCMJ?
Senator, those
Yes
are
or no?
multiple false anonymous reports.
Everything's a
peddled by
lie.
NBC.
Do you
Everything-
know that
everything's a lie.
Directly
On the job
contradictory to the
is
dozens of men and women at Fox
Everything's a
News
lie.
who I work with
I'm
who
not
came
hearing
on
the
the
answer to my
record
question.
and said they've
In your
never
opening
seen
statement,
that.
Mr. Hegseth, you commit to holding leaders accountable at all levels.
If it was
And
bad,
please
it was
do,
a
of
lie.
course. And frankly, as Secretary, you will be on the job 24/7. You recently promised some of my Republican colleagues that you stopped drinking and won't drink if confirmed, correct?
Absolutely.
Will you resign as Secretary of Defense if you drink on the job, which is a 24/7 position?
I've made this commitment on behalf of the
Will you
men and women I'm
resign as
serving.
Secretary of Defense
I've
if
made this
you
commitment
drink
on
on the
behalf of
job?
the men and women I'm serving
I'm not
because it's the
hearing-
most important deployment
I'm not
of my
hearing an
life.
answer to my question, so I'm going to move on. While you have made that commitment, you will not commit to resigning if you drink on the job. As
Wow.
Secretary of Defense, you will swear an oath to the Constitution and not an oath to any man, woman, or president, correct?
Senator, on multiple occasions, including as a young second lieutenant, I have sworn an oath to the
Answer is
Constitution,
yes.
and I'm proud to do so. Yes, ma'am.
In June of 2020, then President Trump directed former Secretary of Defense Mark Esper to shoot protesters in the legs in downtown D.C.,
Wow.
an order Secretary Esper refused to comply with. Would you carry out such an order from President Trump?
Senator, I was in the Washington, D.C. National Guard unit that was in Lafayette Square during those
Would you
events,
carry
holding
out
a
an
riot
order to
shield on
shoot
behalf of my
protesters
country.
in the legs?
I saw 50
as
Secret
directed
Service agents
to
get injured
He
by
would.
rioters
He
trying to
absolutely
jump
would.
over the fence, set
Again,
the church
He'd
on
be
fire,
happy to
and
do it.
destroy
You know
a
what, that sounds to
statue.
me that you will
Chaos.
comply with such an order. You will shoot protesters in the leg. Moving on. President-elect has attacked our allies in recent weeks, refusing to rule out using military force to take over Greenland and
That's
the Panama
terrifying. He
Canal,
won't answer that.
and threatening to take
That should have
make
been a simple
Canada
no.
the 51st state. Would you carry out an order from President Trump to seize Greenland, a territory of our NATO ally Denmark, by force? Or would you comply with an order to take over the
That'll be on
Panama
the
Canal?
nightly news.
Senator, I will emphasize that President Trump received 77 million votes to be the lawful
We're
commander-in-chief
not
of
talking
this
about the
country.
election. My question is, would you use our military to take over Greenland or an ally of Denmark?
That's crazy.
Senator, one of the things that President Trump is so good at is never strategically tipping his hand. And so I would never in this public forum give one way or another direct what orders the president would
sounds
give
to
me
me-
in any context.
That sounds to
That's
me
a
that you
yes.
would contemplate carrying out such an order to basically invade Greenland and take over the Panama Canal.
This is why this is scary. She's getting to the heart of it.
Current DoD policy allows service members and eligible dependents to be reimbursed for travel associated with non-covered reproductive health care, including abortions. Will you maintain this common sense policy?
Senator, I've always been personally pro-life. I know President Trump has as well, and we will review all policies. But our standard is whatever the president wants on this particular
Okay,
issue.
so
With my advice, I will take a
if
look
the president
at.
tells you that this
I don't
common
believe
sense
the federal-
policy will not be maintained, you will not enable our service members to seek reproductive care. So it
I
sounds
don't
like to
believe the
me.
federal government
I'm not
should be
hearing
funding
answers to my questions,
travel for
Mr.
abortion.
Chairman.
Wow.
I just want to note that the other area that
This is a
of
disaster.
serious concern to me is President Trump saying that he wants to use the military to help with mass deportations, which will cost billions of dollars. And but what that will do to readiness is very, very concerning. Mr. Hegseth, I have noticed a disturbing pattern. You previously have made a series of inflammatory statements about women in combat, LGBTQ service members, Muslim Americans, and Democrats. Since your nominations, however, you have walked those back on TV and interviews, and most recently in your opening statements. You are no longer on Fox and Friends, Mr. Hegseth. If confirmed, your words, actions, and decisions will have real impacts on national security and
You're no
our
longer on
service
Fox
members'
and
lives.
Friends.
There are close to 3 million personnel in the Department of Defense, $900 billion budget. I hardly think you are prepared to do the job. Thank you, Mr.
Senator,
Chairman.
Thank you. That wasn't a question.
Owned him.
Mr. Hegseth. Thank you, Senator Rono. Senator Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Hegseth. Congratulations on your nomination, and thank you and your family for your service and sacrifice.
thank you, Senator.
Now for the most important question you will receive all day.
Oh, here's the
In
fucking terrible question.
1935, before the Congress, the father of the United States Air Force, General Billy Mitchell, was testifying about a certain place in the world. He said, quote, "I believe that in the future, whoever holds this place will control the world. This location is the most strategic place in the world." What place was Billy Mitchell talking about? And let me give you a hint, it wasn't Greenland.
I believe he was talking about the great state of Alaska.
He was talking about the great state of Alaska. Great answer. If confirmed, will you commit to come with me to the great state of Alaska,
Oh my
meet our
gosh.
warriors who are on the front lines every day?
Senator,
Oh
I
my
have,
gosh.
and as I mentioned to you in the past,
It's
I did
all
a
so
brief
funny.
training exercise up at Fort
Big
Wainwright.
joke.
At a previous part of my military life. I look forward to returning.
Great. And I will say, we are on the front lines with this new era of authoritarian aggression. In Alaska, the last 2 years, we've had Chinese and Russian naval task forces.
These are our
joint
senators.
strategic bomber task forces in our EEZ, in our ADIZ. And after his election, President Trump put out an extensive statement on Alaska, which included the following statement: "We will ensure Alaska gets even more defense investments as we fully rebuild our military, especially as Russia and China are making menacing moves."
Oh, James
in the
says I'm a
Pacific.
joke.
Mr. Hegseth, if confirmed,
Can we just
will
show
you work
James
with
what
me,
love
this
looks
committee,
like in
and
the chat?
incoming
Throw up some blue
Commander-in-Chief on
hearts.
continuing to build up
The American
our
flag, because we're
military assets
patriots
and
here. We love our
infrastructure
country.
in Alaska to
And we also don't
re-establish
denigrate people
deterrence
when they
in
don't
the Arctic
deserve
and in
it.
the Indo-Pacific.
So thank you,
If
James.
confirmed, Senator, it would be a pleasure to work alongside you and this entire committee to recognize the very real threat in the Indo-Pacific, the very real ways, even
There we go. Spam
these
the
past
chat
couple
with
of
blue
weeks, that
hearts.
Russia has
The
attempted
American
to probe
flag.
and
We are
push
patriots.
in and around Alaska.
That's
and
why we're
also the
watching
very
this,
real strategic
because we actually
significance of
love our
Alaska
country.
vis-a-vis shipping lanes through the Arctic. There are many,
We
many
want the
ways in
best
which
people
Alaska
to serve it,
is strategically significant,
not
and with a shift
lowlives, not
toward a
alcoholics,
necessary
sexual
shift toward
abusers.
Indo-PACOM. Alaska, by necessity, will play an important role in that.
Thank you, Ms. Hegseth. I very much appreciate your focus on lethality in warfighting. We desperately need it.
Suspect Zero gave it $10. Thank you for the $10.
Military, which is not focused on readiness.
You're one of
or
the many
lethality,
standing in the
and wanna
gap
get
for
your
a lot of us.
comments
Thank
on
you.
it.
Thank
Nobody
you.
wants
Thank
an
you for being here. We're
extremist or
in this
racist our
together.
military, but
We are
one of
in
the
this
most
together.
disgraceful and shameful things I've seen over the past 4 years as a senator on this committee and as a Marine Corps Reserve officer was on day one, the Biden administration played up a false and insulting narrative that our military was chock full of racist and violent extremists. This reached a pinnacle in this committee when Biden's Undersecretary of Policy, Colin Kahl, the number 3 guy at the Pentagon, testified that one of his top goals would be to, quote, ending violent extremism
Is this the senator
and
asking him
systemic
questions or hating on him?
racism within the ranks.
I'm like,
of
are
the
they gonna
military.
hang out
He
after
had no
this?
data on this. The media loved it, fanned the flames, wrote baloney stories on this
Alaska
false
is
narrative.
not sending its best.
Disappointingly, some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle here reinforce this ridiculous narrative, one even suggesting that almost 10% of our uniformed military was extremists, 200,000 members, ridiculous, by the way, from this committee on the other side of the aisle. Mr. Hegseth, unlike Undersecretary Call, you
Where's
have
the
a lot
question?
of experience with our military. Do you believe the military is a systemically racist
There it is.
organization? And if confirmed, will you commit to defend, not denigrate our troops?
Senator, I was also offended by those comments because anyone who's been on active duty in the National Guard,
Pete
man and woman
Hegseth,
in units, understand
is the
that it's
military
fundamentally
racist?
false.
By the way, there's 3 studies, to his credit, Secretary Austin put out one of them, that said exactly what you just said. Fundamentally false.
Senator, they knew it. Anyone who'd been in a unit knew it. One could argue that if not the least, one of the least racist institutions in our country is the United States military. Being a racist in our military has not been tolerated for a very long time.
One of the
Never in my
greatest civil
formations,
rights
never in other
organizations in
formations.
America. Would you agree the U.S. military is one of the most forward-leaning, probably one of the greatest civil rights organizations in American history?
No doubt.
Let me turn to another one. Last year at a hearing before this committee, I called on the
Thank you,
Biden
Samantha.
Secretary of the Navy to resign because he's failing in his ability to build ships. We are being completely outbuilt in terms of ships by the Chinese.
Being
and yet this
outbuilt in terms
Secretary
of
the Navy
ships.
has been focused on climate change, not building ships in lethality.
Bro.
Mr. Hegseth, if you're Secretary of the Navy,
The Navy's focused
ends up
on climate
focusing on
change, not
climate
building
change more than
ships.
shipbuilding and
Are you
lethality,
fucking kidding me?
Will you commit to me to fire him?
My Secretary of the Navy, should I be confirmed, sir, will not be focused on climate change in the Navy. Just like the Secretary of the Air Force won't be focused on LG-powered
Okay. Good to
fighter
know.
jets. Or the Secretary of the Army will not be focused on electric-powered tanks.
Let me ask,
We're going to be focused on lethality
1 minute
and
left.
defeating our enemy.
And I appreciate that. The other thing President Biden did, his first executive order as president was to focus on transgender surgeries for active duty troops. This is all, I'm describing the woke military here under Biden over the last 4 years. If confirmed and you issue an order saying we are going to rip the Biden woke yoke off the neck of our military and focus on lethality and warfighting, how do you think the troops will react?
The Biden woke
Senator,
yoke.
I know the troops will rejoice.
They will love it.
They will love it. And we've already seen it in recruiting numbers. There's already been a surge since President Trump won the election of recruiting.
think,
The
like-
Army
And
says
you
it's
think
now
our military will
surpass
One
its
and our
person
military will follow
got a
that
surgery.
order?
Our military will
cares?
follow that order, Senator.
Gladly.
Gladly, because they want to focus on lethality and warfighting and get all the woke, political prerogative, politically correct, social justice, political stuff out of the military.
So
Thank you,
the military
Senator
should be able to
Sullivan.
have health care for its citizens
Thank you, Mr. Hegseth.
or for its
I'm Looking
members.
forward to this opportunity
Who
to talk.
cares
I
if
wanna
one
return to the
person
incident
got
that
a
you referenced a minute ago
surgery for
that occurred in
themselves?
Monterey, California, in
If that's the
October
health care they
2017.
needed. It's
At
so
that time, you were still
stupid.
married to
Like,
your
who
second
cares?
wife, correct?
I believe so.
And you had just fathered a child by a woman who would later become your third wife, correct?
Senator, I was falsely charged,
It's
fully
all lies.
investigated, and
Everything's a
completely
lie.
cleared.
So you think you are completely cleared because you committed no crime? That's your definition of cleared? You had just fathered a child 2 months before by a woman
Thank you,
that was
Northern
not your
Skies.
wife. I am shocked that you would stand here and say you're completely cleared. Can you so casually cheat on a second wife and cheat on the mother of a child that had been born 2 months before, and you tell us you are completely cleared? How is
Senator-
that a complete clear?
Senator, her child's name is Gwendolyn Hope Hegseth, and she's a child of God, and she's 7 years old.
And she
I'm
was,
glad
and
she's here.
you cheated on the mother of that child less than 2 months after that daughter was born, didn't you?
Those were false charges.
Well,
It was
no,
fully investigated, and I was completely cleared. And I am so
you've
grateful
you've
for the marriage
admitted-
I have to this
No,
amazing woman behind me.
you've admitted that you had
Wow.
sex at that hotel in October 2017. You said it was consensual, isn't that correct?
Anything,
You've admitted that it was consensual, and you were still married, and you just had a
Wow.
child by another woman.
again,
How do you explain your
completely
judgment?
false charges against
Child
me.
of God.
No,
Fully
wait.
investigated, and I was
You-
completely clear.
You have admitted that you had sex while you were married to wife 2 after you just had fathered a child by wife 3. You've admitted that. Now, if it had been a sexual assault, that would be disqualifying to be Secretary of Defense, wouldn't it?
It was a false claim then and a false claim now.
If it had been a sexual assault, that would be disqualifying to be Secretary of Defense, wouldn't it?
That was a false claim.
So
Just
you
talking
can't,
about a hypothetical.
so you can't tell me whether someone who has committed a sexual assault is disqualified from being Secretary of Defense?
Senator, I know in my instance, and I'm talking about my instance only, it was a false claim.
But you acknowledge
And
you
it was
cheat, but
fully
you
investigated.
acknowledge that you cheated on your wife and that you cheated on the woman by whom you had just fathered
Child
a
of
child.
God.
You have admitted that.
I will allow your words to speak for themselves.
You're not retracting that today. That's good. I assume that in each of your weddings, you've pledged to be faithful to your wife. You've taken an oath to do that, haven't you?
Senator, as I've acknowledged to everyone in this committee, I'm not a perfect person, not claiming to
But
be.
no, I just asked a simple question. You've taken an oath, like you would
He's
take
taken-
an oath
that's
to be
a good
Secretary of
point.
Defense in all of your weddings to be faithful to your wife. Is that correct?
I have failed in things in my life, and thankfully, I'm redeemed by my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.
In finalizing divorces from your first and second wives, were there non-disclosure agreements in connection with those divorces?
Senator, not that I'm aware of.
If there were, would you agree to release those first and second wives from any confidentiality agreement?
Senator, it's not something I'm aware of.
But if there were, you would agree to release them from a confidentiality agreement?
Senator, that's not my responsibility.
Did you ever engage in any acts of physical violence against any of your wives?
Senator, absolutely not.
But you would agree with me that if someone had committed physical violence against a spouse, that would be disqualifying to serve as Secretary of Defense, correct?
Senator, absolutely not have I ever done that.
You would agree that that would be a disqualifying
Wow, he
offense,
can't answer. It's
would you not?
disqualifying.
Senator, you're talking about a hypothetical.
I don't think it's a hypothetical. Violence against spouses occurs every day. And if you as a leader are not capable of saying that physical
Do you think he's
violence
done that?
against a spouse should be a
Does he know
disqualifying
something?
fact for being secretary of the most powerful nation in the world, you're demonstrating an astonishing lack of judgment. The incident in Monterey led to a criminal charge, a criminal investigation, a private settlement, and a cash payment to the woman who filed the complaint. And there was also a non-disclosure agreement, correct?
It was a confidential settlement agreement off of a nuisance lawsuit.
Right. During an interview, you claimed that you settled the matter because you were worried that if it became public, it might hurt your career. Do you
This is the
maintain
best
that you were
questioning so far.
blackmailed?
Senator, I maintain that false claims were made against me. And ultimately,
Your attorney
those
used
false
the
claims,
phrase-
I have the opportunity to attest my innocence in those false claims.
But you didn't reveal any of this to President Trump or the transition team as they were considering you to be nominated for Secretary of Defense. You didn't reveal the action. You didn't reveal the criminal complaint. You didn't reveal the criminal investigation. You
Get
didn't
his
reveal
ass.
the settlement. You didn't reveal the cash payment. Why didn't you inform the commander-in-chief and the transition team of this very relevant event?
Senator, I've appreciated every part of the process with the transition team. They have been open and honest with me. We've had great conversations between the two of us, and I appreciate the opportunity that President-elect Trump has given me.
You chose not to reveal this, right? Because you knew it would hurt your chances. So you chose not to reveal this really important thing to the commander-in-chief and the transition team because you were worried about your chances rather than trying to be candid with the future president of the United States. Are there any other important facts that you chose not to reveal to the president-elect and his team as they were considering you to be Secretary of Defense?
Senator, I sit here before you, an open book, as everyone who's watched this
An
process.
open book who won't answer
With
questions.
multiple non-disclosure and confidentiality agreements tying the hands of many people who would like to comment to us. Much has been made of your workplace behavior as a leader of nonprofit veterans organizations and as a Fox News contributor.
Tim
Were you
Kaine is
fired from either
murdering
of the
this man.
leadership positions with the nonprofits?
I was the leader, I was the CEO of Concerned
I know
Veterans
which
for
ones,
America
but
and
those
executive
two,
director
were
of
you
Vets for
fired?
Freedom.
Were you fired from either
And I
of
was
them?
never fired from a
Do you have
veterans organization.
do you have non-disclosure agreements with either of those
Thank you, Lynn, for the
organizations?
Not
$10.
that I'm aware of, Senator.
According to his own mother, his
Many
answer
of
should have
your
been
work
yes, he has
colleagues have
abused
said that
women.
you show up
Yes.
for work
Good
under the
point.
influence of alcohol or drunk. I know you've denied that, but you would agree with me, right, that if that was the case, that would be disqualifying for somebody to be Secretary of Defense.
Senator, those are all anonymous false claims, and the totality.
They're not anonymous.
The letters
We've
on the
seen-
record here.
They're not anonymous.
On the record, people
We've
who
seen
work with
records
me
with
at
names
Vets
attached
for
to them.
Freedom, Concerned Vets for America, and Fox News
One of
attributing
your-
to me
one of your colleagues
working
said-
hard every day on behalf of
One of
my
your
mission.
colleagues said that you got drunk at an event at a bar and chanted, "Kill all Muslims." Another colleague, not anonymous, we have this, said that you took coworkers to a strip club. You were drunk, you tried to dance with strippers, you had to be held off the stage, and one of your employees in that event filed a sexual harassment charge as a result of it. Now, I know you deny these things, but isn't that the kind of behavior that, if true, would be disqualifying for somebody to be Secretary of
Well,
Defense?
those are made up. Those are
Senator,
lies.
Anonymous false charges.
They're not anonymous. And I'll just conclude and say this to the chairman. You claim that this was all anonymous. We have seen records with names attached to all of these, including the name of your own mother. So don't make this into some anonymous press thing.
Oh, the
We have seen
mom.
multiple names of colleagues
Smacked.
consistently throughout your career
Smacked.
that have talked about your abusive actions,
Chairman, I think
attitudes,
he's
words,
over
and
his time.
statements
He's way
to
over
women.
his
I
time.
now yield.
And thank you very much. I now ask unanimous consent to enter into the record
damn.
a family court order concerning
Holy shit. Wow. He smacked him with the mom and he couldn't respond. Holy shit. Tim Kaine goes, "Your mother." And thank you for the $10, Kathy.
And I'm sorry for what has
Okay,
been
let's-
happening to you, particularly the very idea that you should
He
have to
said, "Yo,
sit
mama."
there and answer hypothetical potential in somebody's imagination crimes that may take place at some point, and wouldn't that disqualify you if you were a murderer or if you were a rapist? Unfair, and I'm embarrassed for this behavior. But first, I want to say thank you for your strong proclamation, unapologetic proclamation of faith in Jesus Christ. I sat here and listened to your opening statement and thought,
Just a
wow.
quick plug for
this is a
myself.
guy.
If you're not subscribed, consider subscribing. It does help my channel a lot. So if you're new here, I'm a Democratic strategist. I do YouTube and I do videos every day. And if you're not, if you haven't liked the channel or like the live, please consider doing that too. Thanks.
Future as our secretary, and I look forward to that day happening. I also want to get back to, you mentioned, and it got rather dismissed quickly, pivoted, as a lot of things do. You'd mentioned that you were not able to serve with your National Guard unit in the protection of the inauguration of Joe Biden because of a tattoo, a Christian tattoo.
Thank you
Can
so
you
much for
elaborate just a little bit on what is this very offensive, extremist, racist tattoo that you have?
It's a tattoo I have right here, Senator. It's called the
Oh my God, the
Jerusalem
racist
Cross.
tattoo?
It's a historic
No.
Christian symbol. In fact, interestingly, recently I attended briefly the memorial ceremony of former President Jimmy Carter on the floor of our National Cathedral. On the front page of his program was the very same Jerusalem Cross. It is a Christian religious symbol. And when the events happened before preceding the Biden inauguration, I was a part of the mobilization to defend that inauguration as someone who'd been a proud supporter of Donald Trump, but also a member of the military, had orders to come to Washington, D.C. to guard that inauguration. And at the last minute, those orders were revoked. I'd never had orders revoked before. I'd been on orders to a lot of places to do a lot of difficult and dangerous things. They were revoked, and I was not told why. Later, when I wrote my book, I was able to get information. It was because I had been identified someone who'd served in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Guantanamo Bay, holding a riot shield outside the White House, I'd been identified as an extremist, as someone unworthy of guarding the inauguration of an incoming American president. And if that's happening to me, Senator, how many other men and
He
women,
is an extremist,
how many
bro.
other patriots, how many other people of conscience?
If
We haven't
you
even talked about
view
COVID.
your service for the military through a Christian
Tens
lens,
of thousands
that is an
of service members
extremist.
who were kicked out because of an experimental vaccine. In President Trump's Defense Department, they will be apologized to. They will be reinstituted with pay and rank. Things like focusing on extremism, Senator, have created a climate inside our ranks that feel political when it hasn't ever been political. Those are the types of things that are going to change. And Senator Sullivan, you mentioned that study. After a whole study was held, extremism working group study,
Think of the 4,100 people watching.
were identified in the ranks of 3 million. And most of those were gang-related. So it was a made-up boogeyman to begin with.
You, Mr. Hegseth, are not the extremist. The people who would deny you your expression of faith are the extremists. They're the racists. They're the bigots. You're the one that is protecting their right to be one. Thank you for that.
Holy
I want to go
shit.
to your another point in your opening statement. And it's summarized
This
in this
guy's
beautiful
giving him, like-
one-sentence paragraph. You said, quote,
I don't want to
leaders
say on YouTube,
at all levels
but it's like his
will be
mouth
held
is where
accountable.
it shouldn't be on
And
TV.
warfighting and lethality and the readiness of the troops and their families will be our only focus. At that moment, in my mind's eye, I heard soldiers, airmen, Marines, sailors, guardians from the Pentagon to the Pacific and everywhere in between applaud. Applaud. And they're thinking, it's about time. I can get on board with that idea. And quite honestly, and I want to get to this because I think it's so important. I would say, I don't know, just about maybe everyone, I'm trying to think of an exception to this, that wears the uniform that has ever come
Yes,
before
it
this
is a
committee or
job.
that I've met with privately, publicly, that I've been on tours with, that I've traveled with, that wear the uniform, whether it's with 4 stars or no stars, agrees with that statement. And I just want to caution you, and I'd be interested in your feedback on this. You know, there's been a lot of talk about firing.
Kevin Kramer is
woke
ready to
generals,
hawk
creating the purge group and all those things you and I have talked about. I would say give those men and women a chance under new leadership. You know, my favorite painting in the rotunda is of George Washington retiring his commission, establishing on day one, a man who could have been king, chose to be a civilian leader of this country. And I just would encourage you to
Where's the question?
To trust them first, and look forward to them saluting the civilian leadership of this country. So just maybe if you could spend a minute just elaborating a little about the wokeness, where it comes from, and who will be held accountable.
The wokeness comes not from the uniform ranked, Senator, but from the political class. On day one, on January 20th, when President Trump is sworn in, he will issue a new set of lawful orders. And the leadership of our services will have an opportunity to follow those lawful orders or not. Those lawful orders will not be based on politics. They will be based on readiness, accountability standards.
He has no business
and
running
lethality.
anything but his shoes over.
That is the process
LOL.
by which
Thank you for the
leaders will be
$5,
judged.
D-Bell.
And accountability is coming, because everybody in this room knows if you're a rifleman and you lose your rifle, they're throwing the book at you. But if you're a general who loses a war,
What if
you
you're
get
an
a promotion.
ex-president who holds on to
That's not gonna
classified
happen in Donald
documents at
Trump's
Mar-a-Lago?
Pentagon. There will be real standards.
What about that?
For success. Everyone from the top, from the most senior general to the most lowly private, will ensure that they're treated fairly, men and women, inside that system.
I also just want to commend you for your answers to Senator Fisher's questions about nuclear deterrence, but I also appreciate the fact that you emphasize reputational deterrence, because deterrence is not a weapon system, it is an attitude, and you project an attitude of deterrence. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh my God.
Thank you, Senator Kramer. Senator King.
Don't forget the towel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hegseth, welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Senator.
You've made several references to your religion today. I share that devotion to Christianity, but I must say I've been reminded somewhat of Saul on his way to Damascus. You seem to have been converted over the last several weeks and several months. You wrote in your book just last year that, but if we're going to, this is the book, War on Warriors, but if we're going to send our boys to fight, and it should be boys, we need to unleash them to win. Later on, our boys should not fight by rules written by dignified men. Which is it? Is it only boys can fight? I mean, you've testified here today that you believe in women in combat, but you didn't just last year. How do you explain your conversion?
Senator, my testimony is clear. Writing a book is different than being Secretary of Defense, and I look forward to leading the men and women of our military. And my comment there, Senator, was about the burdensome
Bro
rules
is getting
of
through,
engagement
just so you know.
that members of
I think he's going to
our
get through.
generation, men and women, have seen on the battlefield. And one thing President Trump changed in meaningful ways that led to meaningful developments on the battlefield. When President Trump took control in the first term, ISIS was raging across Iraq. And as someone who spent a lot of time there with other men and women who invested in that mission, it was a very difficult moment to see the black flag of ISIS fly. And what President Trump did was untie the hands of warfighters. He changed the rules of engagement, untied the hands of warfighters, and allowed them to complete their mission and crush ISIS. It has not just tactical implications, operational and strategic implications, how you allow warfighters to go about winning and fighting their wars. President Trump understands that, and within the laws of war and the Uniform Code of Military Justice, we are going to unleash warfighters to win wars so that wars don't drag on forever, as our generation has seen.
So are you rejecting Title 18 and Title 42, I think, also has provisions that incorporate the Geneva Convention and the laws of armed combat? Are you saying that those laws should be repealed? That is the law of the land right now.
Senator, we have laws on the books from the Geneva Conventions into the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and then underneath that you have layers in which standard or temporary rules of engagement are put into place. We fight enemies also, Senator, as our generation understands, that play by no rules. They use civilians as human shields.
So are you saying
they target
that
women and children?
The Geneva Convention should not be observed?
We follow rules. We follow rules, but we don't need burdensome rules of engagement that make it impossible for us to win these wars.
You're saying two different things. You're saying we follow rules, but we don't have to follow the rules in all cases. Is that correct?
Senator, I'm making
some rules.
Senator, I'm making an important tactical distinction that warfighters will understand. That there are the rules we swear an oath to defend, which are incredibly important, and this committee understands and helps set them. And then there are those echelons above reality, from corps to division to brigade to battalion, and by the time it trickles down to a company or a platoon or a squad level, you have a rules of engagement that nobody recognizes. And then it makes you incredibly difficult to actually do your job on the battlefield. That's the kind of assessment and look that an Army major will give to this process if I was confirmed to be the Secretary of Defense.
Your quote is
true understanding of that.
Your quote in 2024, our boys should not fight by rules written by dignified men in mahogany rooms 80 years ago. That would be the Geneva Convention. America should fight by its own rules, and we should fight to win or not go in at all. Are you saying that the Geneva Convention provisions, which clearly outlaw torture of prisoners, should not apply in the future?
Senator, how we treat our wounded, how we treat our prisoners, the applications of the Geneva Conventions are incredibly important. But we would all have to acknowledge that the way we fought our wars back when the Geneva Conventions were written are a lot different than the asymmetric, non-conventional environment of counterinsurgency that I confronted in Iraq and Afghanistan. I was the senior counterinsurgency instructor in Afghanistan. My job was to understand how the Taliban and Al-Qaeda operated so that NATO units coming in could be informed of what was happening. They knew our rules of engagement,
try to run
and
out
when
the
they were
tape.
more restrictive, they took
When
advantage
it's
of them, and
adversarial
it put
question.
our men and women in a more dangerous and difficult place.
And you believe
For
that
future wars we fight, we need to have someone atop the Pentagon, sir, who understands how those ripple effects
Well, I just want
impact
to
the men and women
understand
in
your
uniform.
position. Your position is torture's okay. Is that correct? Waterboarding, torture is no longer prohibited given the circumstances of whatever war we're in. Is that correct?
Senator, that is not what I said. I've never been party to torture. We are a country that fights by the rule of law, and our men and women always do. And yet we have too many people here in air-conditioned offices that like to point fingers at the guys in dark and dangerous places, the gals in helicopters in enemy territory who are doing things that people in Washington, D.C. would never dare to do, or send, in many cases.
In one of your interviews, you said they're willing to do this. You're talking about Donald Trump and Senator Cruz. They're willing to do something like waterboarding if it's going to keep us safe. Are you okay with waterboarding?
Senator, the law of the land is that waterboarding is not legal.
So the statement that you made, you now recant.
So, like, see how it doesn't answer?
They are willing
Are you
to
okay
do
with
something like
waterboarding?
waterboarding if it's
Sir,
going to keep us safe.
The
you
law of the
expressed
land is
that with approval.
waterboarding is not okay.
Senator, I'm very familiar with
He's not
that
answering.
as a concept, having spent a year at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, guarding 700 of those that attacked us on 9/11.
I just want to be clear. Are we going to abide by the Geneva Convention and the prohibitions on torture, or are we not? Is it going to
Senator,
depend
as
on the
I've-
circumstances?
As I've stated multiple times, the Geneva Conventions are what we base ours, but what an American first national security policy is not going to do is hand its prerogatives over to international bodies that make decisions about how our men and women make decisions on the battlefield. America First understands we send Americans for a clear mission and a clear objective. We equip them properly for that objective.
All right,
We give
I
them
have
everything they
I have a
need,
very few
and then we stand behind them with the rules of engagement that allow them to fight decisively
I
to
understand.
defeat America's enemies, which is why we say
I just have a
quietly
few
and
seconds
peacefully in
left,
this
Mr.
conference
Hegseth,
room.
if you could. I was very disturbed in your opening statement where you talked about the priorities that you have. We will work with our partners and allies to deter aggression in the Indo-Pacific from the communist Chinese. There's not a single mention in this statement about Ukraine or Russia. Is this code for we're going to abandon Ukraine?
Senator, the president, that's a presidential level policy decision. He's made it very clear that he would like to see a end to that conflict. We know who the aggressor is. We know who the good guy is. We'd like to see it as advantageous for the Ukrainians as possible, but that war needs to come
You
to
talk
an
a
end.
lot about deterrence of China. I would submit that Xi Jinping is watching what we do very carefully. If we abandon Ukraine, that would be the strongest signal possible to Xi Jinping that he can take Taiwan without
We have to
significant
defend
resistance
Ukraine.
from this country.
Thank you, Senator King. Senator Scott of Florida.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to enter into the
Oh,
record
God.
two letters which testify to Mr. Hegseth's
No.
leadership record at Concerned Veterans for America. The first letter submitted by Mr. Darren Selnick, a senior advisor at CFA, stated that there's been no
Rick
better
Scott.
leader, policy champion, or fighter for the military and veterans. than
Voldemort.
he was instrumental in 2014 and 2017 in ensuring that veterans had health care choice. The second letter submitted by Mr. Kaysen Sparrow, Digital Media Director of CVA from 2015 to 2017, stated, Pete brought incredible energy, focus, and a clear vision to the organization and showed everything that the team accomplished together.
And I similarly asked to submit to the record a letter from Paul J. Roberts, retired Colonel, U.S. Army Special Forces, speaking to the unwavering integrity of Mr. Hegseth. Is there objection? Without objection, those three will be admitted. Senator Scott.
All right. First, congratulations on your nomination.
Thank you, Senator.
And thank you for being willing to serve our nation. I served in the Navy. I'm really proud of my dad. He was crazy. He did all 4 combat jumps with the 82nd Airborne. He, after that, survived all that and fought in the Battle of the Bulge. And what they went through, it was hell. So I have a lot of respect for him and for everybody that puts on the uniform and serves in battle and has to lead people in battle, because being on a ship, that didn't happen to me, but I had a lot of friends that happened to, and it clearly happened to my dad. I've served on this committee for 6 years, 2 years under President Trump and the past 4 under President Joe Biden. I've seen how the Biden-Harris administration pushed the DOD to prioritize wokeness over being the most lethal military force in the world. It's our readiness, our national security, and our ability to recruit people who are willing to put their lives on the line for our country. Can you talk about some of the changes we can make to improve recruitment and rebuild our military into the most lethal force in the world?
First of all, Senator, thank you for the question. Thank you for your time. I think the first and most important thing we could have done is elect Donald Trump as the new commander-in-chief.
Just FYI.
Because past is prologue. Our warfighters understand what kind of commander-in-chief they're going to get in President Donald Trump. Someone who stands behind them, someone who gives them clear missions,
Kathleen,
someone
thank you for
who
donating 10
ends wars
memberships.
decisively. And the issue of Ukraine was mentioned. and ensures
Wow.
new
Let's
wars
give a
are
round
not
of applause
started.
for Kathleen.
There was a minor incursion under Barack Obama into Crimea, followed by nothing under President Trump, followed by an all-out assault by Vladimir Putin into Ukraine under the Biden administration. That did not happen under Donald Trump. Donald Trump managed the Taliban. Under the Biden administration, Afghanistan collapsed tragically, ending in the lives of 13 at Abbey Gate, who we remember every single day, and no one was held accountable for that. Chinese spy balloons were flying over the country. None of that happened under Donald Trump, and our warfighters understand that. So there's no better recruiter, in my mind, for our...
So how this works is they will meet after this hearing. They will vote as a committee. And then if he passes committee, then he goes to the Senate to vote. So there's a few steps. And Bettina, thank you for becoming a member.
Out of how decisions are made inside the Pentagon. What gender you are.
Clap is working. We don't have the chat on the screen, but it's right here. Like if you were to see it here, you can see the claps, but we've decided not to have claps on the screen for this.
West Point, or whether you graduate from Ranger School. The only thing that should matter is how capable are you at your job? How excellent are you at your job? I served in multi-ethnic units in every place that I worked, every place that I served. None of that mattered. But suddenly we re-inject DEI and critical race theory, dividing troops into different categories, oppressor and oppressed, in ways that they otherwise just want to work together. That's why I've pointed out before, and I'll say it again, and because I'm sure it'll be quoted to me at some point. The dumbest phrase in military history is our unity is our strength. No, our shared purpose is our strength. Our shared mission is our strength. We are one DoD community of all, committed to the same mission. Has nothing to do with your background. Has to do with what your commitment is to the country. And that is my solemn pledge to every single person that would put the uniform on and reflects President Trump's priorities as well. Senator.
Thank you. You know, we talked a little bit about the fact the Pentagon can't do an audit, right? Can you talk about, and I mean, to me, I've run big businesses. It's all about accountability. If you want to get an audit done, you can get an audit done. You might get a letter saying there's things you have to fix, but it all goes to accountability, and we haven't had it. So can you talk about how you bring accountability to the table, what you've done in the past, and what you're going to do with regard to bringing accountability to the Pentagon?
I meant it when I said it in the opening statement, Senator. I know what I don't know. I know I've never run an organization of 3 million people with a budget of $850 billion. But what I do know is that I've led men and women. I've led people. And it's leadership of people and motivation of people and a clear vision of people where you build a team, cast that vision, empower people properly. I want smarter and more capable people around me than me. And you will get that at the department. I cast the clear vision, build the plan, work it. We set the metrics, and everyone is held accountable. I know our incoming businessman president believes in accountability and holding people accountable. That will happen at the Pentagon. I mean, this has been a problem for a long time. Secretary Rumsfeld gave a speech on September 10th, 2001 that's mostly forgotten. But it was about the need for acquisition reform, cutting tail to give to teeth to warfighters. And then 9/11 happened. And these are problems that have been persistent for a long time. But now we have new threats. And we need the urgency of this moment. As you said, Mr. Chairman, the most dangerous moment we've been since the end of the Cold War and possibly since World War II. The urgency to do everything possible to get the capabilities into the hands of warfighters, emergency powers, Defense Production Act, whatever it takes.
Probably 300 million.
Is certainly part of it.
400 million.
Why do you want to do this? Why do you want to do this job? What drives you?
You have 30 seconds.
Really? Why
Because I love my country, Senator, and I've dedicated my life to warfighters. People see me as someone who hosts a morning show on television. But people that really know me know where my heart's at. It's with the guys in this audience.
The guys.
Who've had my back, and I've had theirs. We've been in some of the darkest and most difficult places you can ever be in. You come back a different person. And only by the grace of God am I here before you today. I'm doing this job.
That's right, Lynn.
For them.
Thank
for
you.
all of them.
Thank you, Mr. Hegseth. Senator Warren.
Pete, why are you so awesome?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Hegseth, thank you. Thank you for your service. So if you're confirmed as
here we go.
Secretary of Defense, you will oversee our military, including about 250,000 women who currently serve
Let's get some
on
blue
active
hearts in the
duty
chat
in
for
Army,
Senator
the Navy, the
Warren.
Air Force, the Space Forces, and the Marines. And I have serious concerns that your behavior toward women disqualifies you from serving in this role. Now, I've been trying to get answers from you for quite some time on this. You haven't wanted to
Get 'em,
meet or
Warren.
answer any of my questions.
Come on, Senator.
So we'll just have to do it here and dive in. I want to pick up on some of the questions asked by Senators Shaheen and Gillibrand and Hirono. And I just want to make sure we have a list of some of the facts that I think are undisputed. I'm not going to talk about anonymous sources. I'm just going to quote you directly. We've got the video. We've got it in print. So going back to January 2013, you told a Fox News interviewer that women in the military simply couldn't measure up to men in the military, saying that allowing women to serve in combat roles would force the military to lower the bar. You picked up on that same theme in 2015, making remarks on Fox News, referring to women in combat as, quote, it would erode standards. June 2024, you said on Ben Shapiro's podcast, quote, women shouldn't be in combat at all. And then, of course, we've talked about it in 2024. You published a book, and you say on page 26 of your book, we need moms, but not in the military, especially in combat units. Page 48 of your book, you claim that women should not be in combat roles because men are distracted by women. And then 10 weeks ago, you appeared on the Sean Ryan show and said, I'm straight up just saying we should not have women in combat roles.
Wow.
Now, I presume you recall making all these statements?
Senator, I'm not familiar with the article you're pointing to in 2013, but it underscores my argument
I've got the
completely, because
video.
in that 2013 argument, I was talking about standards.
So
Standards are what it's always been about,
Let's not
Senator.
have this same fight again.
Always been about Senate
I've quoted
standards.
you directly. We've got the video. We're happy to show it. But I want to be clear here. For 12 years, you were quite open about your views, and your views were consistently the same. Women are inferior soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen, and guardians. And in case anyone missed the point, and these are your words from 10 weeks ago, women absolutely straight up should not be permitted to serve in combat. And I notice on each of these quotes, those are said without qualification. It's not by how much you can lift or how fast you can run. They don't belong in combat, period, or your words, straight up. And then on November 9th, 2024, just 32 days after your last public comment saying that women absolutely should not be in combat, you declared that, quote, some of our greatest warriors are women, and you support having them serve in combat. Now, that is a very, very big about face
That's
in
right.
a very, very short period of time. So help me understand, Mr. Hegseth, what extraordinary event happened in that 32-day period that made you change the core values you had expressed for the preceding
a good
12
question.
years?
Senator, again, I very much appreciate you bringing up my comments from 2013, because for me, this issue has always been about standards. And unfortunately, because of some of the people that have been in political power for the last 4 years, priorities other than standards, lethality, and meritocracy have driven decision-making.
I'm quoting you from the podcast. Women shouldn't be in combat at all. Where is the reference to standards? That they should be there if they can carry, if they can run? I don't see that at all, Mr. Hegseth. What I see is that there's a 32-day period in which you suddenly have another description about your views of women in the military. And I just want to know, what changed in the 32 days that the song you sang is not the song you come in here today to sing?
Senator, the concerns I have and the concerns that many have had, especially in ground combat units, is that in pursuit of certain percentages or quotas, standards have been changed. And that makes the combat more
No,
difficult
let me make a
for everybody
suggestion
involved.
about what happened in that 32 days. You got a nomination from President Trump. Now, I've heard of deathbed conversions, but this is the first time I've heard of a nomination conversion. And I hope you understand that many women serving in the military right now might think that if you can convert so rapidly your long-held and aggressively pursued views in just 32 days, that 32 days
Yeah, it's almost
after
like he's
you
lying to get the
confirmed,
job.
maybe you'll just reverse those views and go back to the old guy who said straight up, women do not belong in combat. Now, Mr. Hegseth, you have written that after they retire, generals should be banned from working for the defense industry for 10 years. You and I agree on the corrosive effects of the revolving door between the Pentagon and defense contractors. It's something I would have liked to talk with you about if you'd come and been willing to visit with me. But the question I have for you on this is, will you put your money where your mouth is and agree that when you leave this job, you will not work for the defense industry for 10 years?
Senator, it's not even a question I've thought about because
You can
it's
think
not
about it
one
right
that-
now.
It's not one, my motivation for this job
I understand
has never
that. I
been
just
about
need
what
a
could
yes or no
conceivably
here.
come next.
Time is short. I just need a yes or no.
I would consult
is
with
it
the
time
president about
short?
what the policy should be
In
at the Defense
other
Department.
words, you're quite sure that every general who serves should not go directly into the defense industry for 10 years. You're not willing to make that same pledge?
I'm not a general, Senator.
You'll be the one, let us just be clear, in charge of the generals. So you're saying sauce for the goose, but certainly not sauce for the gander?
I would want to see what the policy of the
Oh,
president
I'll
is.
bet you
Thank,
would.
thank you,
wow.
Senator Warren.
All right.
Senator
all right, all
Tuberville.
right, all right. Friends, we got to end it there.
I'd like to
Let's just go to me. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. That was so fun. Thank you for being here with me. I've got to go live my life now. So let's just end with some music. What's the good song here? That's pretty good. Thanks for joining. I haven't gone live in 2 months, so it felt good to do that. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for the super chats, for the comments, it's so nice we have this space we can do this together. Thank you for Kathleen. Just a shout out to Kathleen for gave 10 memberships to folks. I just want to say it has been great spending this time with you. Thank you so much for subscribing, for liking, and for watching the videos. It's amazing that this is all happening. And we do have a goal of 500,000 subscribers this year. I think we're going to hit it. So, and I've got a couple of interviews coming up. I'm actually doing one today at 4 p.m. with Tom Suozzi, Representative Tom Suozzi, who replaced George Santos, funny enough, in Congress. And so look out for that. And I got to prep for that now. And I will talk to you all later. I hope you all have a great day. America's worth fighting for. And Pete Hegseth is a piece of crap. Bye, everyone. All right.